And the idea of the law of electronic transmission was that that image must appear as it is on the other end. The issue here is that there appears to be a place at which that format was changed. No reason has been given why that format was changed, so that it can go to any other format. But also to add that through one of the most popular applications today in Kenya is WhatsApp, and nobody changes. We get a lot of images as original as they are, as colored as they are, in the hundreds on an everyday basis. And I do not think there is any justification why an image taken on a JPEG or on a KIMS-kit cannot appear in the same format throughout the electoral process. The other question was in respect of the evidence, whether the 4 commissioners participated and what that meant. I would ask the court to look at the annexures that are put as MWK3 in the affidavit of the second petitioner, Martha Karua. And in that flash disk, there are 2 incidences at the National Tallying Center. In one incident, Commissioner Justice Nyang'aya comes out to read the results of Kiambu Town constituency. After he reads the results, it turns out that the result he has read has overstated the votes of William Ruto by 10,000, and also that he has gone past 100% of the votes cast, and he is forced to have to come to reread the results. That shows the commissioner had not known what he was reading. The other video is that also of Juniera Cherele. Again, she's given results to read of Juja constituency with the same results, inflated votes for the respondent, and a more than 100% voter turnout. And again, the results have to be reread. That would leave it to the commissioners themselves to explain. The other issue is about the constitutionality of Regulation 87. Now, first, our position is that a regulation or any act that is unconstitutional does not need the order of the court to be nullified. It is already nullified by Article 2. And at any time, it remains a nullity ab initio. The second issue to consider is the duty of every person, not just the court, to defend the Constitution as required by Article 3. And the fact that this chairman, the chairman of the IEBC, is a person who has qualifications similar to be the Supreme Court judge. So it is him who has betrayed the Constitution. It is him who has seen a regulation which is so clearly unconstitutional, has refused to defend the Constitution, and instead feigned ignorance and purported to use an unconstitutional provision to exercise power. So on that basis, every action that is done on the basis of that regulation is itself unconstitutional. The other question was regarding why the 4 commissioners did not raise issues to the end. Again, that we will leave for the commissioners to decide. But we can profile 3 theories. One is the issue of the 89th minute penalty, that if you participate in a game and the wrong penalty is given on the 89th minute, you cannot be asked, why did you play all along? Sometimes it is the 89th minute penalty that shows the unfairness of the provision. It could be the last straw that broke the camel's back, or it could be a road to Damascus moment. In whichever fashion we look at it, it is an issue that is understandable. The other question is in regarding for if there were to be ordered a repeat election, who would conduct it? Would go back to Article 250, Subarticle 10, because the Constitution provides for positions of vice chairpersons of all commissions. But Article 250 does not lay out any roles that they're supposed to be undertaken by those vice chairpersons. Our position is that that provision is not empty. and it is meant to provide for succession plans in commissions in places where an emergency or situations such as this, where such a succession is necessary. But the second issue would also be that the court itself, in inherent powers, has the power to ensure that its orders are fully obeyed and fully executed. And in such a situation, the court would treat its order as an order that has to be executed and would have the inherent powers to make all such other orders that are necessary to ensure that those orders are executed in full. Before I go to my last issue, I want to comment on something that was said about no agents. And one of the issues this court was told is that it appears there is a jurisprudence that is being built that where an agent does not appear from the other side, then the opposing side has a right to steal or a right to commit fraud, or somehow excuses the IEBC from any duties because there was no agent. And in fact, one of the advocates likened, said that you must have agents in every place, and even likened to agents. I said they should be like your wife. I believe that is what was said. Apart from the fact that that statement is very sexist and insulting, not just to women, but even to constitutionalism. Their courts must restate the duty of IEBC to protect the vote at all times in every place, and that it cannot pass the buck to parties when wrongs happen, and also must put the obligation on every contested in an election that if you meet a place where there is no agent, it does not give you a right to steal the election in that place. The last issue, and I follow this up with what my learned friend Maha did, I want to show the courts a Form 34A from a place called Gasharaigo Primary School, and it is in Muranga, in Kangema constituency, in a ward called Murugo, in stream 2 of 2. And this document is overlaid over some documents, but look at the left-hand top corner. It is overlaid over a document written Jose Camargo. Jose Camargo is one of the Venezuelans that was arrested at the airport with charges of coming to interfere with the elections. He is one of the people that the last Mahat has said did not have access to the RTS. This form is in the official portal of IEBC. The question would be, was this document photographed by a presiding officer at Gasharaigo Primary School, sometimes possibly at 8 o'clock in the night? Or is it possible that this document has been photographed elsewhere in some office and uploaded? This, we ask the court to read the DCI report regarding Jose Camargo, and we believe, my lords, that these are the fingerprints of one of the suspects of the theft of this election. That is all.
Good morning, my ladies and my lords. I will pick up from where my learned colleague and senior Mr. Paul Mwangi has just left off, the court had asked that we demonstrate with examples in real time how the Form 34A was interfered with or could be interfered with. And I will do so showing you or using the IEBC's forms itself, straight from the IEBC, from the IEBC portal. My lords and my ladies, I will walk you back through the form that we have just showed you. I see that the court has laptops, which means you're tech savvy, and you can access the IEBC portal right now. This is going to be a live demonstration, as the court asked that we do. I'm asking that we go to the forms portal in the IEBC. We are projecting it up so that it's not said, because we have been accused of cooking things, forging things. We've been called many names. This is the IEBC's own document. We're asking that you open on your own devices, but even as we show, Muranga County. Kangema, Muguru, and Gasharaigo, Primary School 02. This is live. My lords and my ladies, we have downloaded a Form 34A from the IEBC portal. And I'd like the court to just scrutinize this form before we go to other details. From where I am, the stamp. The stamp. My lords and my ladies, is that the IEBC stamp? It's on the IEBC portal, looking like it's been superimposed over another stamp. We have been asked to show how are the figures changed. The votes. Now, my lords and my ladies, if we look at the votes cast, the first figure on the form is for Raila Odinga, 55. It's followed by William Ruto, 260. It's followed by, I think that's Mwaure Waiga, 001. And the last is Wajakoya, 000. If we sum up the total votes, we get 316. The total votes cast according to this particular form is 321, different from what we have just seen. The rejected votes are 4, which means already by calculation there is a problem. But we'd like the court to look at the total number of registered voters. A close scrutiny of the form shows that the number was probably 455, and the 5 is actually similar to the figures written in the votes cast. But somebody or somehow that figure has been changed to make it look like 488. It is obvious to the naked eye when you look at that form. Now, when we go to now the bombshell itself, the top left-hand corner of the form, we were told by my colleague, Mr. Gumbo, there were no foreigners in this election. We were told the foreigners left before the 8th of August. We were told they did not even have access to maintain the server. This is on the 9th of August, and at the top left-hand corner there is the name of one of the Venezuelans, Jose Camargo. This is the person who decided the president-elect of the country. It is on the IEBC portal. It is live. How did that come there? What are you doing? This person is the one who was interfering with the forms. We are able to demonstrate, at least a crumb was left. By God's grace, we found something. We didn't make this up. We were told we forged these documents. Now, this is how, my lords, the staging was happening. This is how the changes were happening. This is on the 9th of August. We were told they were not there. I'm going to do, because of time,
with your permission, Your Ladyship.
I beg your pardon. In our petition,
You read our finish and then you tell us what it is. They're responding.
It relates to an objection to what she's doing, Your Ladyship.
No, let her finish.
my ladies, my lords, that name, Jose Camargo Gregorio, appears in our petition, and is also, that evidence is also found in the affidavit of the second petitioner, one of the people whom we complained about as having interfered in the election and who were told had no access. My lady, we're going to take you again on the same IBC live portal to show how the staging was happened. And because of time, if we can go to Bungoma. We want to do it live, and we're doing it live on the IBC portal. My lady, we were told about the KIMS kit and how they work. The serialization of the numbers. We have been told that each of the 42,201 KIMS kits that were used in the election had their own unique KIMS kit ID and serial numbers. Bungoma County, Mount Elgon, Chesikaki, and Songoyiwa. We'll download the form. The nomenclature of the KIMS kit and the form is shown at the top on the address bar. And for purposes of time, my lady, what we're told, it will show you that that's a Form 34A. It will give you the serial code of the polling station from which that Form 34A relates. And then it will show you the KIMS kit serial number or ID. There'll be a date stamp and a time stamp. What I'd like the court to focus on is the serial number, and perhaps because I can't see from here, this is where I would have liked the court to have its own, but maybe if it can be. Do you have a roving mic? Now, the serial number on this particular form, my ladies and my lords, which I would have liked for the court to confirm for itself. If somebody there can, may I ask one of the court assistants to read for us the serial number as it is so that then I'm not accused of making up things?
That's all right. It doesn't change anything. Evelyn, could you read that?
The number that starts with F2, it's in the middle. Or can I read it myself?
I can't see it. The one on top.
Yes.
TR06.
No.
Oh, sorry. F2.
My ladies and my lords, what would require is that you note down that number. We will compare it with another later.
It reads F2 3045 0M 00204 133.
The time, please. It's right next on the date.
That one. The time is
the date on which
9th August 2022 at 1956.
We'll check another form. Nyeri? Nyeri Town? Gatitu? Morogoro? Thunguma Primary School? Stream 3. Can you read the serial number?
F230450 M00204133.
And the date and time, please?
9th August 2022 at 23:49.
My ladies and my lords, this is the same KIMS kit transmitting or sending results, one from Mount Elgon, 1,000 kilometers away from Nyeri Town. 2 hours later, how is that possible? When each KIMS kit was supposed to have, each polling station had its own unique KIMS kit, which was supposed to transmit from its own unique IP address. Because of time, I cannot demonstrate the thousands of forms that we have identified with the same issue. My ladies and my lords, this is how the staging or the complaint that we raised happened. We did not give this court a fiction. What we gave the court happened. Now, staging, and as we have shown, the 11,000 polling stations that we had complained were staged were transmitted all from one IP address. Every KIMS was required to have its own unique IP address. The only way 11,000 KIMS kits or results can be transmitted from one IP address is if they were collected, and as probably my senior Paul Mwangi had. May I beg your pardon, my time is up.
Yes, 2 minutes.
Yes. My ladies and my lords, the manner in which the election was stolen, the reason why staging was necessary was forms were intercepted like this. Whoever intercepted them then had time to decide which ones they could manipulate before uploading them and sending them to the IBC portal. The other reason that we know there was manipulation is because the original Form 34A is a colored form that should have appeared at the National Tallying Center if transmitted in one transaction as a colored form. All the forms that are on the IBC portal are in black and white. At what point were they altered from JPEG to PDF? When did that modification happen? And what other modification was done to the form? We submit to you that we have shown that not only was it possible, it did happen, and the fingerprints of those who interfered in the systems are still there. Thank you for your time. I don't know whether to be that generous. I donate the 29 seconds to the court. Thank you very much. At the insistence of my seniors.
May it please the court, my name is Kirago Kimani. My learned friend, Mr. Katua Kigen, had gotten the attention of the court, but was asked to wait until Ms. Soweto had completed her presentation. I would wish to respond to what she has just addressed you on, because this is new material, and would like to have direction.
Mr. Kirago?
Yes.
When I forget his name, Mahat was answering the questions, he did the same.
Yes.
He went through his PowerPoint.
That's correct.
To demonstrate.
That's correct.
How this staging was happening, because we asked that we be explained.
Yes.
How the forms were being captured in the hair. Yes. And being changed. And he did that.
Yes.
Going back to what he had done. Yes. So what is new here?
What is different is this. You have a petitioner and you have rules that say how they are to present their case.
This was answering a question from court.
Yes. Where does the first respondent have an opportunity to address these matters? At what point in time does the first respondent get a hearing?
This was a question by the court to demonstrate.
Yes.
How this was happening.
Yes.
What we do with the demonstration. Mr. Mahat on your side did demonstrate,
Mr.
and they have demonstrated.
I appreciate what your ladyship is saying, but Mr. Mahat, with respect, is not on our side. He is a referee. My client was a candidate. We are not on the same side. We may be respondents, but he called this march, not for us, but as required by the Constitution.
Mr.
But anyway, the
Kirago,
long and
I'm
short
sorry.
of it, yes.
I'm
The long and
sorry.
short, yes.
We are not going to give you time.
Much obliged.
Yes, thank you. Proceed with, there were responses from the other petitioners. I'm beginning with number 1, the same order we followed. You have responded. So who was next? It was, I think, Senior Counsel Jan Mohammed was her client. The same order we followed so that we don't waste time. If you can't use the 15 minutes, please.
Your Ladyship, Madam Deputy Chief Justice, my lady and my lords, I was very generous in my opening, so I'm sure I'm going to be just as generous and patriotic as I am in my rejoinder. I was the first one to donate 7 minutes in my opening.
Okay.
My lady, on behalf of the petitioner, in number 1, that's the second petitioner, we had filed a rejoinder of the submissions after our original submissions. And my lady, the petitioner's case is very simple. All it was the petition was limited to a legal issue. It was the role of the commissioners vis-à-vis the chairperson.
I saw people murmuring, and I want to get this correct.
I'm sorry.
Is it that we should then, because I thought you had a response, you had any question to answer?
In fact, my lady, the question I'm going to be answering is actually the rejoinder as to the role, as the answer to the role.
For purposes of orderliness, because we are trying to get our proceedings as orderly as possible, then we can start with the rejoinder by the first petitioner, then the others will answer the questions with their rejoinder.
Because my actually rejoinder is the response to the question of what the role of the other commissioners was vis-à-vis the chairman and the commission. Okay. That's what my entire petition is based on.
So then we start with the main petition.
That's fine.
Rejoinder, then we come to you. I'm sorry about that.
That's no problem, my lady. I'll still donate my time.
Yes. Senior Counsel Olengo, it's your turn.
I'm just wondering, because if I heard the court correctly, there are some questions put to Mr. Mtata.
They will respond with their rejoinder.
With the rejoinder?
Yes.
Oh, okay, then that's correct. In our rejoinder, Madam Chief Justice and the members of the court will have 4 in our team giving the rejoinder. Senior Counsel Firoz Norji, Senior Counsel Otiende Amolo, and Senior Counsel Philip Murgor, and I'll have 5 minutes at the end. But I'll begin with Senior Counsel Otiende Amolo.
If it may please Your Ladyship, this Honorable Court, I will be brief in this part. I will cover only 3 quick subjects, starting with the issue of the 50% plus 1. Your Ladyship, this Honorable Court, may it be noted that the question of the voter turnout in this election is a moving target. It is a moving target depending on who's speaking and in what circumstances. If you look at the replying affidavit of the chairman, paragraph 30, as of 9th of August at 5 p.m., he says the turnout was 64.6%. That is an affidavit he's swearing way after the fact. The director of elections of that same date, at that same time, in paragraph 21, that is Moses Sunkuli, says it was 56.17. at that same time, looking at the same KIMS kit. It will be noted by this Honorable Court that at various times, the IEBC gives different figures. At one time, it uses the figure of 65.4%. At another time, it uses the figure of 64.6%. It is our submission, my lords, my lady, that the premise upon which IEBC proceeds is wrong, and that the reason for this moving target is so as to manipulate the question voter turnout, to come to a conclusion that the 9th respondent met the constitutional threshold when they didn't. I wish to submit, Your Ladyship, my lords, that Article 138 is very clear, and the total number of registered voters must be specified, and that is the denominator. The IEBC did publish a Gazette notice that confirms the exact number of registered voters and gives it as 22,120,458. In this court, using what they say is the turnout per the KIMS kit, the figure they are seeking to use is 22,005,541. We wish to submit, Your Ladyship, my lords, that that premise is problematic. The common denominator to be used is the voter turnout as published in the Gazette, not the voter turnout as per the KIMS kit, which ends up with a moving target. We wish to submit, Your Ladyship, my lords, that not only is it true that the target is moving, if you look at all the permutations, and this is in the supplementary affidavit of Dr. Edgar Otumba, if you take any of the scenarios and you use any of them, and we will submit, we have submitted this for ease of reference, because Dr. Otumba covers is between paragraph 5 and paragraph 30, and puts all those graphs. By whichever permutation, none of the candidates then achieves 50% plus 1. Whether you use, remove rejected votes, you add rejected votes, whatever permutation, and there are 7. We wish to submit, Your Ladyship, my lords, that you then need to come to the conclusion that even though they try to take time to tamper with the voter turnout, they do not achieve that target. The last point on that. Why is it wrong to use the vote turnout as per the so-called KIMS kit? Other than the fact that it's unlawful, it is also illogical. We have 46,229 polling stations. If you are to rely on the KIMS kit, and all 42,298 KIMS kits failed, and only one in one polling station functioned, then it means that if the 700 voters in that polling station voted, the IEBC will be telling us that the voter turnout is 100%. That would be the logical consequence of that narration. That cannot be. The voter turnout cannot be something that depends on the interpretation of the IEBC at its convenience. It must be the denominator as a percentage of the total registered voters. My second point. My lords, my lady, and I do not want to go too much into this, the question of the infrastructure, what the IEBC called the impregnable military style infrastructure. I think it's been demonstrated that it was certainly not at a military grade. It might be important to note, Your Ladyship, my lady, that the one question they failed to answer was why was there stoppage of the streaming of the results at Bomas. They have not answered that, because that military grade infrastructure was obviously compromised. My lord, my lady, we say that it is bad to have a sovereign institution that is captured by the state, but it is worse to have one that is captured by foreigners. We submit that is the position in this one. Your Ladyship, my lord, the question here, and that's my third and last point, is really very simple. and it's a question that draws directly from Article 138(3)(c) of the Constitution. It is very clear, it is mandatory, that once results are received, the IEBC, not the chair, shall tally and shall verify, then shall declare results. If the IEBC as an institution has not tallied, has not verified, then there are no results to be declared. We wish to submit that at the end of this analysis, it is not a question of whether the chair is a hero or otherwise. It is a question of whether the chair did what was expected of them. It is not enough to say that there are certain regulations by the first respondent which they themselves made and now they wish to rely on to breach the express provisions of the Constitution. We wish to submit, Your Ladyship, that in accordance with Article 141, only if there's a result properly declared can you even move to challenge it. In this case, none was done. Your Ladyship, what the chair is inviting you to do is unconstitutional. This bench comprises eminent persons who are involved in the process of making the Constitution, as some of us on this other side. There's a good reason why we've created constitutional commissions and independent offices. If it was intended to create the chair as what was previously called the supervisor of election, there'd have been an independent office, like the Auditor General, Controller of Budget, like the DPP. But now the chair is inviting you to find that his is some sort of imperial chairmanship or chairpersonship in defiance of the Constitution. We wish to invite you not to accept that invitation to amend the Constitution belatedly. My lady, my lords, at the end of the day, the only question will be, did the chair act in accordance with the Constitution? Is it fair to invite you to find that the other commissioners do not matter? The chair of IEBC is a first among equals, just like in this court. There are 7, just like the judges of this court. But the fact, Your Ladyship, you are the Chief Justice and you are the President of this court. Yet the Constitution would not allow you to exercise veto powers over the other colleagues. Why would the chair believe that he can have such powers over the other colleagues? Ultimately, my lords, Your Lady, it is the decision of the majority that must be the decision of the court. And similarly to the IEBC, as we are here today, the decision of the IEBC is that the match that was being played was stopped by the referee. If it was in court, it would be a mistrial. By their own admission, they have said that things happened which should not have happened, and therefore it was not complete. My lords, my lady, in 2017, this court made history by nullifying the first presidential election in this continent, and I think only the second known to me in the world. In this year, it is the IEBC that is making history. It is the first electoral body to concede that they did wrong. I want to submit, my ladies, my lords, that you cannot override that decision by IEBC itself because it's made by the majority. I wish to stop there for now. Thank you, my lord.
My Lady Chief Justice, members of the court, I address the court firstly on the issue that in making your final decisions, in reviewing your own views, the views of the respondents, petitioners, parties who have addressed you, we would be praying for the prayers and orders that we have sought. And in doing this, may I first refer to the principle that would be applicable in approaching your decision and judgment. In this context, the court has heard today from my senior, AG Emeritus, Honorable Gīthurano, in answer to your question, that it was the intention of the makers, it was the intention of the makers that the Commission should have an executive chairperson. That we have learnt much by that, but that is not what we or they and your ladyships and lordships can proceed on. We have to proceed on what is in the Constitution. There is no provision in the Constitution for even if that were the intention, there is no intention shown to override any of the other commissioners or their views or their actions, or to change the Constitution's clear provisions of Article 138(3)(c). The tallying has to be done by the IEBC. The verification has to be done by the IEBC. The declaration decision has to be made by the IEBC. And where there is a specific step to be taken in an executive fashion by the chairman, it's provided by 138(10). The declaration of the decision of the result will be made by the chairperson. Secondly, it is an important consideration. When yesterday the question arose of the two aspects. One, that although there was a further day still in hand, the chairperson rushed to judgment without the 27 constituency results because of the doctrine of necessity, said Counsel Professor Kindiki in justification of this. The doctrine of necessity was not necessary at all. There was no crisis at that moment. They were, he has indicated, in great danger of their lives. But 20 minutes later, they were shaking hands with his client, and his client was shaking hands with a very able-bodied chairperson. Nobody left that hall in the imminent expectation of watching carnage and bodies lying all over the floor. No one. There were church people, 2 rows of church people. There were, and I am grateful to them, the choirs who had kept us not entertained only, but inspired through those hours and hours. There was no imminent danger. This continuous, they could not resist the temptation of showing a still photograph in order to show that there was a necessity. No, there was not. And it is very important to realize that we do not use these exaggerated criteria in order to come to a justification of plain wrong. Is it the issue is, was the Constitution being followed or not? And that is where the concentration has been lacking from the respondents. An important aspect of this, of bringing forward the doctrine of necessity, is that it is a very dangerous legal justification. It shows the need to bypass the constitutional justifications and arrive at a subjective, convenient, and self-serving justification. And it is dangerous because it has been used before by lawyers as eminent as Professor Kindiki. It has been used in Rhodesia after the UDI, Unilateral Declaration of Independence, to hang freedom fighters who were resisting the Universal Declaration of Independence. And the doctrine of necessity goes one step forward to say that if power has been usurped, taken, otherwise than in compliance with the Constitution, the courts should still recognize the usurpation of power. And they were hung, not only in Rhodesia, but in Pakistan. After a coup, their courts accepted that the doctrine of necessity, the acknowledgement of what was shown to be the new Grundnorm, would have to be acknowledged. And so, the coup was all right. And so, my learned friend, the professor, is saying, you too must acknowledge. And what does the doctrine of necessity always acknowledge? It acknowledges wrongful taking of power. And the Grundnorm is thereby changed, and therefore the court must accept it. So they're basically saying to you, recognize there was need, recognize that the chairperson did this out of necessity, and therefore it has to be accepted. It was done in Nazi Germany. That's where the Grundnorm comes from. And therefore, we submit not only that you should reject it, but you should condemn the attempted use of it so that it can be used here now in this innocuous, apparently innocuous moment in a case in a hall full of lawyers and judges. But it is a very dangerous thing, not only historically, but because Professor Kindiki revealed, perhaps unknowingly, that we now know that the doctrine of necessity has been discussed in their private thinking, and now is brought here publicly. And when there is, next time, there doesn't have to be a chair and 3 people and 2 policemen clearing the chaos. Next time, when there is a manufactured group assaulting another group of 50, 100, 200 people, who will get up and say, we have taken power as an act of necessity? Because our attempt to do so at Bomas, to establish a new government not in compliance with the Constitution, failed, as it should fail. But now, with the doctrine of necessity, we are there. And we will take on anybody who says that we are doing anything wrong, because the doctrine of necessity requires that we restore peace and order and move on. And then when we bring the matter to court, learned Professor Kindiki will be here to say, I will now refer to the case of Mandus Butiro, South Rhodesian law reports, and say, here it is. Here is Pakistan. Here is the case from Uganda after the Uganda coup, applying the same thing. And we say, this is the prophecy that is put forward now in their thinking, shown unwittingly, I think, by Professor Kindiki, and placed before the people of Kenya. We say, not only reject it, but reject it consciously, so that the precedent is not of a submission which failed, but a precedent of the Supreme Court of our land rejecting this ever for use in Kenya. So what should we be using? I'm happy to say that, again, from the respondent's side, I draw some inspiration. And that is from my learned friend, Senior Counsel Fred Gatia. My learned friend, both learned and friend, put forward before the court, and he said, let us get at the substantive truths. He put forward a criteria completely different from Professor Kindiki. And I'm happy to say, yes, let's do that. So we put to you, when we put forward the manipulated postponement of Mombasa and Kakamega, we showed to the court that the Gazette notice, the power which Mr. Chabukati used, was illegal, because in the Gazette notice he lied and put forward just half of what the power he has needs to meet. And so, when we put these forward, they could not reply, but those who attempted the reply said, but look at this. This is his power, this is his section here, and he's an executive, he's this. But Senior Counsel Gatia's principle was a more important and relevant approach. So we say, what is the substantive truth behind the postponement, behind the lying Gazette notice, before the self-serving amendment of the Regulation 67 by which he changed, this chairperson changed or got changed the constitutional provision that the papers 34A and B received at Bomas must be dealt with by the IEBC Commission. Instead, he changed it to the returning officer. It has been pointed out there is no such office, and he put it there. What is the substantive truth behind this? What is the substantive truth behind the fact that despite several orders from you, the server has not been fully opened? What is the substantive truth behind the fact that this is not the first time this chairperson has disobeyed the court? What is the substantive truth of the absence, mood or this or that? Each and every chapter has its specific values set out therein. 81, 86, and at no point in the whole of the day spent and today, this morning, has there been any reference by the respondents' counsel or supporters, or by any reference to instructions, that these values we kept in mind. This is how we advance, by postponing Kakamega. This is the value we advanced. By not checking the wrong printing of the ballot paper, how did we advance Article 10? There is even one more duty on them, on the chairperson. It is that it is part of the duty of the chairperson, the whole commission, to ensure the removal of any impediments to the functioning and the purpose and the aims of the commission. They have breached even that, even the passive duty. And we say, yes, that is what we look at, the substantive truth of all these things. And in that, once you do this, it is clear that this is an election which is brazenly, shamefacedly, without remorse, saying we did right when we were doing wrong. You do what you can about it. Nothing happened to me in 2017 personally. And it is all right. We say no, and we say to the court that not only is the petition, we pray, to succeed, but very importantly, if you find that there is violation of the Constitution by the chairperson, it is not necessary for the court to take any steps to his removal. There is a constitutional position. Thank you. There is a constitutional process to remove him, and there is no need for the court. But there is an important duty on the court that if you find a serious violation, and we submit there are all these serious violations, it is important that the court makes a finding. We hold that, or we find that the chairperson violated this article or that value, and that those are set out. we pray accordingly. Thank you.
Having just come in, good morning, Your Ladyships and my lords. I'll take as short as possible. In order not to repeat, I will be very brief. Arising from the questions asked by the court, I'd just like to put it on record and of course, in particular, the very rapid submissions of my learned colleague, Mr. Mahat. Sometimes you miss exactly what he's saying, but I picked out that he did not at all mention how the system for the KIMS kit was converted to the provision of PDF. The tender document, and we have provided evidence of it, did provide that the KIMS kit would transmit a compressed color photograph image using a compression technique that is in compliance with JPEG. That requirement was never changed unless it was changed quietly, fraudulently, and with the sole intention of rigging the just concluded presidential election. My learned friend, again, Mr. Mahat, challenged everybody that if there was a program that could convert a PDF document or could edit a PDF document, they would buy it. They would buy it. I suppose he meant the IEBC. I, at that point, did ask whether he's an employee of the IEBC, but I was assured he was not. I would like to state for the record that the software for editing a PDF document is available free of charge and can be downloaded by him or the IEBC. And we would request that millions of public money not be used to do this. But the programs that exist for editing a PDF document include Adobe Acrobat DC, Foxit PDF Editor, PDF Filler by AirSlate, PDF Element, Small PDF, Nitro PDF Productivity, Fine Reader PDF for Windows and Mac, Adobe PDF Pack. And I would also invite the court perhaps to try any one of them out. Staging, I just want to add that staging is admitted even by IEBC. So it does not lie in the mouth of counsel belatedly briefed to deny that there was such a facility. Mr. Maina Wachira Nyaga, paragraph 2 of his affidavit, sworn and filed on 29th August 2022, confirms there was a middleware in the results transmission system. And this is also confirmed by one of our IT experts, Mr. Benson Wesonga, that there was indeed an attack from the position of man in the middle. At page the evidence we produced of the data analysis by George Njoroge in his affidavit sworn on 28th August 2022 and filed on the same day, pages 68-73 of his report, Mr. Njoroge says that the results from the the results from the polling station was between the 9th and 14th of August tallied 137,000 times, 137,847 times. On the 9th of August, 38,353. On the 10th, 35,000 times 574. 11th, 16,291. 12th, 8,357. 13th August, 14,357. 4th August, 24,000 times 897. This shows that numbers, the same numbers, were being brought back into the system from 34s, new 34s. Otherwise, and trying to find the magic number that would give the first respondent the win. Finally, I would like to make a few comments on the just concluded exercise, the scrutiny exercise, and state that very shortly that despite the good intentions of the court, the servers were not opened. Unless, of course, there will be another opportunity for us to make a few comments. They will? Or then?
Stop any conversation about the report at this stage.
Okay.
We will allow you time to deal with the report.
Okay. I want to say that the evidence that has been presented by the petitioners shows a well-orchestrated and fraudulent scheme that was executed with military precision. Let me agree with my learned friend, Mr. Mahat, on the use of the word military. He says military grade, but I differ with him to say the rigging was executed with military precision, and given the evidence that has been availed, using expert, foreign, and I'm now using another military word, mercenaries engaged for that purpose. I am not surprised that none of those gentlemen I'm referring to as mercenaries have not sworn an affidavit. People like that disappear and leave the country to its own devices. By the grace of God, we have remained peaceful, and I pray that we continue to do so. And finally, I will yield the floor to my learned senior, Mr. James Ray.
Milady, Madam Chief Justice, we would like a clarification from the court whether the replies and responses relate to questions of law that have arisen from our presentation, or whether it is an opportunity for our learned colleagues to rehash their case afresh and to introduce new evidence.
We know what constitutes a rejoinder. It's a response to issues of law arising from the respondent's response. So just to remind Council, it was about responding to matters of law.
Madam Chief Justice, I also rise to take or to request a clarification. The court was treated to a so-called live demonstration. Shall we be given an opportunity, we don't require more than 3 or 4 minutes, to indicate that what the court was shown is not true? Because otherwise, this image is now all over the country, a sensational image about forms with the names of people, whereas in truth, that is not correct. All that I would request, Madam Chief Justice, is an opportunity for rebuttal. on the basis that that is new evidence. It was never played. Those are not polling stations in the petition. It's totally new. It will be unfair for us to walk away without being given an opportunity to defend ourselves.
Unless the court walks away from the questions that the court asked, you asked for a demonstration of how the staging was done. It was a specific question. And similar questions were asked to our friends to the left. A lot of new material was brought in. We kept quiet because we knew these were questions from the court and that no evidence should be kept away from the court in the search for truth.
What we are doing, and then at the end of it, we'll consider, because we are also checking whether that is new evidence. Yes.
I thank you. I begin by thanking the court for giving me this opportunity to make my remarks as part of the rejoinder for the petitioner. My lady, my lords, when I used to be at Alliance High School, every year, Professor Gīthu is very happy about me mentioning his school. When I used to be at Alliance High School, every year I took part in a school play. Most of the time they were Shakespearean plays. Macbeth, Julius Caesar, Much Ado About Nothing. Can I recover my 4 seconds? Yes, I was saying I acted in every school play for 6 years. And when I became a practitioner of law, I tended to have the habit, every time I would appear in court, to take some verse from those Shakespearean plays, be it a comedy or a tragedy. And one time, S.M. Otieno, from whom I learned a lot as a young man in the practice of criminal law, he told me when I took my seat, "Did you read the charge? Did you look at the statements? Did you analyze the elements or the ingredients of the offense? Always remember, as a lawyer, that oration is not good enough. Substance counts when you appear before the court of law." And I'm saying this because in 2017, when he had a similar petition before your lordships, some of the advocates who are in that petition, acting for the respondents, when we presented our petition, said that what we presented before the court was a science fiction. And I'm not surprised that even at the beginning, and it's well covered in the media, that what we have presented before you is fiction. And because it is fiction, you had a lot of speeches which I think do not belong to a courtroom. They probably should have been delivered in some theater where people love poetry, like my London friend, Professor Gīthu Muigai, whom I know, having attended the same school as I did, we share a lot of things in common. we have presented before your lordships a petition based on averments which are contained in the petition. We have placed evidence before your lordships, and the petitioners did not ask the petition to be struck out. Instead, they filed volumes and volumes of affidavit evidence, and I've addressed you at length on matters relating to the petition. And yesterday, I remember when your lordships and my ladies asked questions to the respondents, my learned friend, Mr. Githu Muigai, said those questions were difficult questions, but they are not as difficult as the questions which were directed against the petitioner. But having said that, there is an important point about this new constitution. And I'm so happy that your lordships and your ladyships, some members of this court, were part of the process of drafting this constitution. And my lady Justice Njoki asked a question which was very pointed. Why did we create these commissions? Why did we create these independent offices and secure their tenure in the Constitution? And the answer is that we are dealing with an imperial executive. The commissions became an insurance policy for the protection of the sovereignty of the people. And if you look at Article 249, the commissions and independent offices are required to protect the sovereignty of the people. And what better tool to use in order to protect the sovereignty of the people than to have fair and free elections conducted by an independent body. And this constitution requires that the elections must be transparent, and they must be administered in a neutral, efficient, accurate, and accountable manner. I would have hoped that if the Electoral Commission was indeed carrying out an election that was free and fair, transparent, and accountable, they will be offering all the evidence, including what is in the servers, that this is what went on, this is the record, this is the return of the elections that were held on the 9th of August, 2022. I thought that we were making progress. Your lordships and my ladies, there was a time that we used to file petitions against even the President of the Republic of Kenya under the old constitution. And if you approach the Electoral Commission before you file the petition, you had access to election documents and election materials before filing the petition. And I did that so many times. My other friend Firoz Norji would tell you, because I was a petitioner. And he filed such a petition. Now, to get information from the Electoral Commission, even after filing a petition and an election has been conducted, is like the road to hell. Because that's what it is. And in Article 249, the sovereign, who is the people of Kenya, require of the Electoral Commission as a state organ to secure the observance of democratic values and principles and promote constitutionalism. Not just in the conduct of the elections, but even the way it runs its affairs. They cannot pretend that they are conducting elections and valuing and securing the principles of democracy as contained in Article 10 of the Constitution, and yet within the body itself, they don't value these principles that are not discretionary. They are, every state organ, every person is required to act in accordance with Article 10. What does the chairperson of the Electoral Commission do in the circumstances, not only of this case, but even in previous occasions? In the Electoral Commission, instead of having a commission of 7 commissioners, and you have seen the factionalism here, you have a triumvirate, you have a trioca that is moving together all the time with the secretary of the commission. This is not what the Constitution desired or contemplated. If you look at Article 88 of the Constitution, the mandate of the Commission in relation to the supervision of elections and referenda, at the end of that Article 88, and I think this is important, sub-Article 5, the Commission shall exercise the powers and perform its function in accordance with this Constitution and national legislation. So that where the chairperson comes before you and does not show conduct that is in consonance with the Constitution, is that a matter that this court can just gloss over? When the Constitution says in Article 2 that this Constitution is the supreme law of the Republic and binds all persons and all state organs, and no person may claim or exercise state authority except as authorized under this Constitution. And throughout that Article 88, the Constitution throughout talks about the Commission, except in 2 instances, one of them being the declaration of the results in a presidential election. So I urge my ladies and my lords that where there's been an infringement of the Constitution, however good the outcome, but there has been an infringement of the Constitution, because the Constitution says how we should conduct elections. It does not matter whether you get 10 million votes or 20 million votes. If you get it by murder and killing people, if you get it by falsifying documents, however the numbers you end up getting in an election, that would not be the kind of election contemplated under Article 81 of the Constitution. The process matters. And anything in violation of the Constitution, if you look at the Constitution broadly, any infringement of the Constitution, violation of the Constitution in relation to state officers, including the President, including members of commissions, any infringement of the Constitution normally would attract consequences of removal, impeachment, because it's a matter that this Constitution frowns on. And that's why I always appreciate the fact that this Constitution requires of citizens, every person has an obligation to respect, uphold, and defend this Constitution. This petition is in defense of the Constitution. Is in defense of the Constitution because there's an election that has taken place that is putting somebody in office or is attempting to put somebody in office without meeting the requirements of the Constitution, not only in terms of, not only quantitatively in terms of votes, but also in terms of what the Constitution requires the conduct of elections to be like. And my learned senior, Mr. Firoz Neorji, referred to a football match. These days, football has many rules, and they keep on improving. However many goals you score, if it is from an offside position, whether you are Messi or Ronaldo, it will not count. It will not count. So I urge the court, and I am an optimist. I think we are doing very well in this republic. I think we have come from very far. And as one who has practiced in these courts when things were extremely difficult, I know we are making progress, a lot of progress. There were times to file a petition like this was not easy. And if you file it, serving that petition will be very difficult. And that is not just because of legislation and a new constitution. The courts had made an intervention many times to protect the people against those who govern them, particularly. I therefore invite your lordships that looking at the article dealing with leadership and integrity, what has been placed before you is not a matter that the court can frown on. Gloss over. This court said in 2017 in the Raila petition that if the Electoral Commission comes before you with the same kind of infractions and transgressions, this court will not hesitate to take measures against the Commission and its leadership. That is in the Raila judgment of 2017. In 2013, this same Commission, fortunately for the chairperson, he was not there at that time, despite the fact that that petition was not allowed, but the court was not amused by the going-ons in the Electoral Commission, and by dint of the comments that were made by the court at that time, at least a few people were taken to court, although that case is still going on. I think this court, and reading the Supreme Court Act, Section 3, together with Article 259 of the Constitution, which talks to how this Constitution should be interpreted, and more particularly when it says in a manner that promotes the values, the purposes, and principles of this Constitution, and contributes to good governance. So I urge this court, with all the humility, that although this is a petition basically under Article 140, as defenders and protectors of this Constitution, you, with respect, cannot allow what has happened at IEBC to go without some kind of action in the lines that was suggested by my learned senior, Firoz Neorji. Impunity must be punished. Impunity must be punished. And impunity unpunished breeds arrogance. and arrogance leads to arbitrary exercise of power. And without that being done, this commission, which has got the protection of the Constitution, without the court making some interventions, it still be a divided commission with a triumvirate that runs the affairs of a commission that is supposed to protect and defend the sovereignty of the people. And what I'm saying in a nutshell, that this election cannot pass on account of violation of the Constitution, even by the constitutional dictates how this commission should run its affairs. If they cannot conduct their affairs in the manner dictated by the Constitution, then how can they preside over an election and that election have some legitimacy to the people of Kenya and to the world? Secondly, and this would be my last point, that if you look at Article 138, sub-Article 4, and my learned friend Mr. Otiende address you on this, that requirement for a successful candidate getting 50% plus one of the votes cast is not an idle provision in the Constitution. It requires of the Commission to come with it before your Lordship seriously when there is contestation and put the numbers before you in rebuttal to the case that we have put before you. My little friend, Mr. Mahat, who is also my very good friend, in his address, he was not talking about what the law requires or what the Constitution requires. He was saying, this is what we do. This is what the Kimskits do. There was no constitutional or legal foundation that he was resting his arguments. And therefore, my ladies and your lordships, I would ask the court to apply the provisions of the Constitution to the letter holistically and allow this petition and return this country and back to the people who are sovereign, and let a proper choice be made of the person who is going to lead Kenya in the next 5 years.
Your Ladyship, Madam Chief Justice, Your Ladyship, Madam Deputy Chief Justice, Your Ladyship, and my Lords of the Supreme Court. The petition that was filed by the first petitioner, to recap it, was a very simple, by the second petitioner, I think we are the second petitioner as amended, was very limited to a legal issue. It was, what was the position vis-a-vis the election and the role of the commissioners? Now, yesterday, and I think Justice Lenola said something about tweeting and stigmatizing, but in a nice way. When this petitioner came, and I had said it in my opening address, and yesterday Mr. Ngatia said, senior counsel said something very, very, it's our country. He said, this is one country that even the humble can go to the top. But there was a caveat that seems to have been missed out. If you are a normal, humble person who comes to challenge a presidential election as required by the law, you still get targeted as being a surrogate because that was repeated 3 times. So there seems to be caveats in these things that we don't seem to know about. Yesterday, my lady, Justice Njoki, asked a very direct question. What is the role of these 6 commissioners and the chairman? Because we seem to be getting in a very empirical chairman. This morning, we got absolutely no idea, except the court was taken to Section 11A and B of the IEBC Act. We were told nothing more. From what I can now see is that these 6 commissioners are supposed to be flower girls and page boys at a wedding, with the chairman being the bride or the bridegroom, as the case may be. That surely was not the intention of the Constitution. It appears that that's because I was actually waiting for that answer just as much as your lordship and lordships and ladyship was there was nothing given. Please go to 11A. That's all you were told. We have an umpire, and I'll use it in the cricket term because in football it's called referee. But here in the cricketing terms, it's called an umpire. It is supposed to be an independent umpire. But I heard some I was a bit surprised yesterday when I heard words like shock and awe tactics. And surprisingly, the shock and awe tactics actually came out in one of the protagonists, the ones, the protagonists of we've won, and that was in one of the affidavits. And these are the direct words that an umpire is using. So how is this umpire as independent as they are claiming to be? That is my client's case, that we need an independent body. The second one, we were told by the umpire, get over it, quote, unquote. We were told by one of the protagonists, move on. If there has been a breach of a constitutional, and as it has been our submission, Article 138, 3C, if there is a breach, do we just move on? That's what we are being told. Forget the transgressions that anybody is doing. Justice Lenola, in the opening day after the petitioners had made some submissions, asked a question which I didn't see anybody answering. He asked a question regarding Regulation 87.3, where he had stated that if it should be struck down, but it's already been done. So, that was the regulation which was in place. If your lordships and your ladyships will look at my submissions, my original submissions we had filed, and we specifically addressed that issue. What is a nullity is a nullity, and I believe it is in the McFoy case, it's an English authority, that we have quoted in our original submissions. So I hope, Justice Lenola, it answers your question.
Thank you.
Because I think nobody here actually took those questions seriously. They didn't answer them. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or being facetious at all. As far as from what I can see is that this, by the law, by Article 138 3C, it says commission. We were told commission, but it doesn't say commissioners. That was a distinction being made yesterday. It says commissioners, doesn't say commissioners, but commission. With due respect, all those commissioners are appointed, not at the same time, but go through the same rigorous process. Does it mean all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, which means the chairman is more equal than anybody else? These, like I've said, and I repeat again, are just flower girls and page boys. That surely cannot be the intention, could not have been the intention of people who drafted this constitution. We go back to where we started from, and I've said that in my original submissions. Where did we come from? We need to know where we came from. One-man show? Surely that cannot be the issue. The other issue that the Chief Justice asked yesterday, why was it not declared to everybody? And that's where my client, that there were all these problems, these commissioners had walked out, the transparency, accuracy. Nobody has given us that answer as we sat through this today. You specifically asked, Madam Chief Justice, why was it not declared that there were these problems, 27 constituencies? Nothing. We couldn't do it because there was a problem. I don't want to go into Maina Kiai case, but you were quoted paragraph 287 of the Supreme Court, which I called RILA, which was RILA 1 or 2. But please, before just looking at 287, please look at paragraph 292 of this court's decision. I don't want to repeat it, but this court specifically said, it is in my original submissions, we fault the appellant, who was the IEBC, and the chairman, who was the current chairman, for there being no verification by the commission. We've been told we've misread the section because it's polling stations. With due respect, if it was going to be only polling stations, why send it to the National Tallying Center? It is for the public to know there were mistakes here, there were no mistakes, whatever else there was. A question was asked by the court yesterday. Why did the running tallying stop? Nobody's given us an answer. All the difficult questions that we were to get answers for, to which my client, as a voter and as Wanjiku, I keep on saying, we have not received any answers whatsoever. No affidavits. In fact, the sad part is, despite this whole matter being consolidated, we were considered the surrogates. Nobody sent us any papers to sign. I have two requests from this court, as I have said, and this was what I was thinking of last night before I went to bed. Where it is established that a state officer is subverting the Constitution and the rule of law, the court's hands are not shackled by procedural niceties. This is the beauty of this Wanjiku Constitution that we have. It's transformative, and some people say it's a very overused word, but in these circumstances it's ideal and can bite when occasion demands. The toothless bulldog is long dead and buried. Please, Madam Chief Justice and honorable judges of this court, bite and bite for the glory of this court. And in closing, whilst we were told our petition is much ado about nothing, and like I said, we've really been battered, but we shall soldier on. I will use Martin Luther King's words because I suppose, unlike Professor Guido Muigai and Mr. James Orengo, I went to a school where they didn't teach us Shakespeare, they taught us things fall apart. They went to the posh schools. And all Martin Luther King said in 1968, at the speech given at the National Cathedral, we shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends to justice. That's all we request. Can we have justice for all of us, for the voters? Because the two parties just think about themselves. They forget us who are the voters. Thank you. And I donate my 4 minutes back to the court.
Thank you. We will have the third petitioner, Youth Advocacy Africa, and Peter Kirika.
Madam Chief Justice and Madam Deputy Chief Justice, and may it please the members of the court. Yesterday, and for a section of this morning, Your Ladyship, I believe we've been allocated 30 minutes. I see the clock says 15. The directions clearly said 30 for us. Youth Advocacy.
I don't know whether there was any question directed to you.
Yes, there were. But the direction said 30 clearly.
No, the directions I have.
Yes, for youth.
Yes, for youth advocacy is 30 minutes.
30 minutes, yes.
Yes.
I think the clock said 15.
Yes.
I was a bit concerned, yes. But for yesterday, for most of yesterday and this morning, members of the court.
Sorry, Counsel.
Yes.
For our record.
Yes.
Introduction.
Yes, Your Lordship. My name is Tom Asharia. I appear together with my colleagues on record for Youth Advocacy Africa and Peter Kireka. Most of yesterday and this morning, you are treated to the theory of an election as it ought to be conducted. My colleague, Julie Soweto, has demonstrated to you what every Kenyan knows. Mambo kwa ground ni different. I call your attention to the affidavit yesterday presented by my good and learned friend, Professor Kindiki, which has been projected. It's the affidavit of Veronica Ndwati. She deposed that she is the Secretary General of United Democratic Alliance and was the Deputy Chief Agent for the 9th and 10th respondents. In particular, I call your attention to paragraph 7, where she states that the verification process went through a 3-tier mechanism. At paragraph 7, she says the second tier was at the constituency level, where the following actions were undertaken. She then goes to subparagraph C, and that is the one of interest here, and this is what she says. In case of any errors, this is at the constituency level, on Form 34B, the same would be corrected. That is the key. Those are the key words. She then goes on at paragraph 8 and says that the third tier was at the National Tallying Center at Bomas of Kenya, where the following activities took place. We go to paragraph 8F. The verification team would also verify that each of the uploaded Form 34A in the public portal is a replica of the original 34A presented by the constituency returning officer, and in instances of discrepancies, the errors were noted. She then says at G, the team would also verify that the data entered in the IEBC online system for purpose of tallying from all original forms was correct. In case the data entered in the IEBC online system is incorrect, the same was corrected on the online system. She then goes at J, a verified Form 34B would thereafter be generated at Bomas. Another one, having corrected at constituency, another one now is generated at Bomas and supplied to the candidates' agents. I specify these particular provisions because, members of the Honorable Court, this is precisely what the chairman of IEBC was told in the minor KI case he could not do. And it bears reading because, as has been repeated here severally, and perhaps I shouldn't repeat it too many times, he is qualified to be a Supreme Court judge. And so we know he understood minor KI. So it is important that we understand what he did not understand about the following passage. It is evident, I'm reading from minor KI, it is evident to us from the above sequence of events that the role of the chairperson of the appellant is circumscribed. Article 138 deals with events at the polling stations where votes are counted, tallied, verified, and declared. The appellant, that's the commission, as opposed to its chairperson, upon receipt of prescribed forms containing tabulated results for election of president, electronically transmitted to it from near 40,000 polling stations, is required to tally and verify the results at the National Tallying Center without, this is the key word, without interfering with the figures and details of the outcome of the vote as received from the county tallying center. Minor KI states further, the chairperson, on the other hand, is appointed under Article 250 of the Constitution. The chairperson cannot be and is not the commission. It goes on to say, and I say this because my good friend George Morogo this morning told you that whether the chairman is the commission or the chairman is a matter of context. It is not a matter of context. Minor KI put that debate to rest once and for all. And finally, to suggest that there is some law that empowers the chairperson of the appellant as an individual to alone correct, then that's the word, correct, vary, confirm, alter, modify, or adjust the results electronically transmitted to the National Tallying Center from the constituency tallying centers is to donate an illegitimate power. Such a suggestion would introduce opaqueness. These were the words used by the 4 commissioners who disagreed with what was going on at Bomas. Opaqueness and arbitrariness to the electoral process, the very mischief the Constitution seeks to remedy. I don't know how much clearer it can get that what the chairman of the commission did was the very opposite of what the Constitution required him to do. Now, Maina Kiai was itself based on several decisions of this court. The first of those being Wanjohi, which is a 2014 case, and it is cited there, where the court said, apart from the priority attaching to the political and constitutional scheme for the election of representatives of governance agencies, the weight of the people's franchise interest is far too substantial to permit one official or a couple of them, including the returning officer, unilaterally to undo the voter's verdict without having the matter resolved according to law by the judicial organ of state. The only organ under our constitutional framework permitted to correct at any level, let alone any of the 3 levels that the chairman of the commission undertook, is this court. It is manifest to this court that an error regarding the elector's final choice, if indeed there is one, raises vital issues of justice such as can only be resolved before the courts of law. We reiterate as we conclude that there is no doubt from the architecture of the laws we have considered that the people of Kenya did not intend to vest or concentrate such sweeping and boundless powers in one individual, the chairman of the appellants. Now, as we stated, the chairman is an eminent lawyer, qualified to be a Supreme Court judge. It is extremely unlikely he did not understand what Maina Kiai had told him. And the only reason he would then have proceeded in the manner that Veronica Nduati tells us is that, to use another Kenyan phrase, mtadu, what are you going to do about it? That is the only reason one can find for what he did. Yesterday, the commission came and told you that the system was accessed thousands of times by officers at the Bomas. And so clearly, you had returning officers, specific special returning officers, assigned to changing forms on the portal, as has been demonstrated this morning. In our submission, the alterations made to this system, to the forms, these so-called corrections that were done at 3 levels, so alterated and contaminated the outcome of the election that it is now incurably defective and incapable of being rescued. Now, we were challenged to demonstrate from their own forms what the problem was with the forms. Now, time doesn't permit me to take you directly to those affidavits, but the Commission has filed an affidavit through the firm of Iseme Kamau and Maema in our petition, the affidavit of Esther Wanjiko Wanjohi. She attaches 14 forms. That's about a quarter or 30% of the forms that you asked to be taken through the scrutiny. Of those 14 forms, 8, representing 57% of the forms, 8 have irregularities, have gaps, have problems, including the fact that when you read them with a QR code, the serial number that shows up is for a different polling station. The problems are correction problems, tallying problems on those forms submitted by the commissioners themselves, by the commission itself. You have an affidavit submitted again by the commission, the affidavit of Nzika Mwololo. Same problems. He has 2 forms. 50% of them, which is 1 form, has an incorrect addition where the rejected votes have been added as part of the total. Now, in light of what Maina Kia has said and what my learned seniors have said here this morning, my mind is taken back to a few months ago when a few of my colleagues here, my good friends here, came before this court and told you and persuaded you that a process known as BBI, one where 1 million signatures had been collected, one which had gone through over 40 county assemblies, one which had gone through both houses of parliament, was irredeemably void and null because the president used the wrong process. And they persuaded you. And I invite you to look at paragraphs 1544, 1535, and 1500 of your judgment in the BBI case, where you stated that any process, any activity undertaken without constitutional authority, as the chairman of the IEBC has done in this particular case, must be declared null and void. And the terms null and void, and this is one of the cases we've stated before you, the case of McFoy versus United Africa Company, is captured in the following words. If an act is void, then it is in law a nullity. It is not only bad, but incurably bad. There is no need for an order of the court to set it aside. It is automatically null and void without more ado, though it is sometimes convenient to have a court declare it to be so. And every proceeding which is founded on it is also bad and incurably bad. You cannot put something on nothing and expect it to stay there. It will collapse. That is the fate the Form 36, the Form 34D, issued by the chairman of the commission in this matter, must suffer as well. Now, my learned friend, Mr. Mahat, has taken you through some numbers. And as I've demonstrated, and as was demonstrated earlier here by my colleagues for the first petitioner, when you have a process where the numbers are so adulterated, where the forms are so compromised, what numbers are we talking about? Numbers that have been verified or quote-unquote tallied in an unconstitutional matter. Our learned senior, I think Mr. Orengo, I think it was Otinde Amolo Senior Counsel, said that the numbers became a moving target. Now, in fact, they were behaving not more like a moving target, but like a group of naughty children in a nursery school running around the yard. It is impossible to get a hold of the number that was used either for the 50+1 or for the tallying or for the verification, which, as you have heard, was changed 3 times. Now, you asked, I think, of the petitioners, how did we get to this place? Like every slow train crash, a train crash in slow motion, those of us who lived through the repressive days that led to the Constitution of 2010 will tell you that it did not happen one day. My good friend Mr. Morogo has told you that the Gazette notice by which the chairman appointed himself as the presidential returning officer. And we need to note, because the defense put here yesterday by the commission, was that he appointed himself on the basis of your judgment in 2017, where in passing you said that there is a national returning officer. Now this year, he has upgraded. He upgraded himself to presidential returning officer. Now you've been told that Gazette notice means nothing. And I think yesterday you were told we ought to be grateful to him because he had the good grace to publish in the Gazette his unconstitutional appointment. Now, whether you publish misconduct in the Kenya Gazette or you publish an offense does not imbue you with some sort of value or does not imbue that process with some good grace or quality if the Constitution does not permit that office to exist or does not permit him to conduct himself in the way he did. A Gazette notice does not improve it. But perhaps more importantly, If it meant nothing, why publish it in the first place? If it meant nothing, why publish it at all? If it meant nothing. But the point I wish to make is this. Complaints were raised. I think I've seen letters written by the party that nominated the first petitioner. There were newspaper articles complaining, gazette notices, newspaper notices complaining that ballots had come without commissioners being told, but you'll get to hear that a bit more. There were complaints made by civil society. But as happened with Kenya, when we ended up in the position we ended up before the 2010 Constitution, we keep pushing these things away to the back of our mind. And people go to campaign, the rest of us go on with our lives, and he publishes a new gazette. I am now the presidential returning officer. He goes on ahead and does other things, allocates duties. You go look after flowers, you go be an usher. These are slowly and progressively, we end up with what was this morning called an imperial chairman of the commission. And so this is how we ended up at this unhappy day, where 4 commissioners say that we cannot stand by these reasons because we were not involved in everything that was done with them. But apart from that, and apart from those obvious misdemeanors and indiscretions that have been pointed out here this morning and the day before yesterday, in our petition, we've raised the fact that even other statutory requirements, the KPMG audit report, for example, was only published on the 5th of August, 4 days to the election. And parties kept asking for this report. Why is the report? And we'd all be told, again, in that most Kenyan fashion, tunashughulikia hiyo maneno. So you go back and campaign, go do your things, and you wait. And on the 3 days before the election, it is dumped on the website, and no one is actually told. There was no press release saying, we've released KPMG now. We had to find it there by accident. Now, when you finally go and look at that report, and you'll see a copy of it in the particular pages I refer you to, pages 1,153 and 1,155 of the year petition, you will find that KPMG complains that both the Commission and Smartmatic withheld critical information as regards how the voters' register was being accessed, and that by the time the report was written and released, they had not received that information. That was the KPMG report. Now, again, the Commission comes here this morning and tries to explain to you how they arrived at the question of voters identified with the printed register. One of the things you will not find in the affidavits filed by the Commission is an account of how many Form 32As were signed as required by law. And that is the only mechanism that the regulations identify for identifying those who have voted outside the KIMS kit system itself. And so what they've done, and that's what I think one of the honorable judges yesterday called a bit of a lecture here yesterday, is do reverse mathematics. You begin by adding up all the votes you say were in the Form 34C, and then you subtract from that those who were identified using the KIMS kit. You have not been given a report of how many Form 32As were signed. In addition to that is the tortured question of Regulation 69, Subregulation 1A. And I've not had anything said about that here. Now, Regulation 69, 1A of the Election General Regulations requires that every time a voter is identified using the KIMS kit, the printed register must be crossed out. And this is not a function of voter identification. This is an audit tool to ensure there's no fraud. A distinction must be made between what was before the Court of Appeal in the case raised before you about the printed register and what the law requires as regards the crossing out. For some reason, the Commission strenuously opposed this audit tool. Now, you've been told that there were approximately 92,000 stray ballots. Now, the mathematics that the Commission Chair uses to arrive to that number, for starters, is not an accountable figure. What they've done, and you'll find that, I think, at paragraphs 73, 74, 75, and 76 of the chairman's replying affidavit in our petition, is taken two constituencies, this is Makadara and Kibra, and said that in those two constituencies, we had an average of 2 stray ballots per polling station. They take an average. And the reason for this is that it is not possible to account for stray ballots in Kenya within the time that this court must rule. Because under Regulation 81E, once stray ballots have been identified, they are put in an envelope, and neither Form 37B, 38B, or 39B have anywhere to indicate stray ballots. They are indicated in a polling station diary. The only way of arriving at a precise number of stray ballots and identifying to whom they strayed, if I may use that word, is to audit the polling station diaries for the 46,000 polling stations in this country. And that hasn't been done. And so we can't speak with any certainty here when a figure is thrown at this court that there are 96,000 or 92,000 stray ballots. No one knows. The truth is that no one knows. That's number one. The second thing is that in arriving at these mathematics, the chair of the commission says that in six polling stations in Starehe and Mathare, the officer locked up the forms in the ballot box. And he then says that in the 6, we cannot account now for 4,200 ballots. Now, 4,200 divided by 6 is 700. What he's saying is that in those 6 polling stations, there was a 100% turnout. You will see that at paragraph 74, 75, 76 of his replying affidavit. Now, when you go to the forms on the portal, as we've been asked to do, the turnout is not 100%. And so that is a false averment in his affidavit. I think much has been said about the forms and the PDFs. I think I won't venture to say anything about that. I think I should also state, because it was part of our petition, that by the time we went to the election, and I think as of today, an audit report as required by the elections technology regulations has not been provided or done. It's not on their website. It's not been provided. The elections technology regulations under the Elections Act require an annual audit under Regulation 10 and 11. You will find in a response by the chairman to the first petitioner's party a letter where he says, we could not do the audit because we did not have money. He has now annexed, in response to our petition, a certificate, a 2-page certificate, where they say we have 10 reports, but he doesn't attach those 10 reports. They are not on the website, and we have not been provided with them as of today. The purpose of that audit is that it might become impossible or unnecessary for us to spend time here discussing things called logs. And the only logs my grandmother knows are those she uses to warm herself. And yet she's the voter. We must, and I think we've submitted before you a case from the German Constitutional Court, which states that unless the public is able to, independent of an expert, audit the process used to conduct an election, then that election is not verifiable. That decision is before you with our digest of authorities. And it speaks to something a bit more nefarious, if I may use that word. We have just been told here today that we had foreigners who have accessed our IT systems. I can't pronounce their names on account of my county of origin. Now, and what has happened is that, and the submission I would make, is that the IEBC ceded control of the process of determining the sovereign will of the people of Kenya to a foreign entity that now says that that data is the intellectual property and cannot be shared with Kenyans. And there are very, very serious questions that arise. And I say this because they were asked of the chairman of the commission. For example, this data, they now say is theirs. Has it complied with the Data Protection Act? Was this company subjected to the provision of Section 31 of the Data Protection Act? And what are the consequences of surrendering our data, our biometric data, to foreigners who now tell us that is now their intellectual property? And I think Kenyans would be forgiven for saying that we're going soon to have leaders made in Venezuela, not in Kenya, not by Kenyans. Allow me to use the few minutes left to address some of the questions I think you raised, especially as regards remedies. But before that, let me just point out that amongst the other failures by this commission was to provide the Parliament of Kenya with amended regulations, which they promised to do last year, but presented amended regulations in June or July as Parliament was going on recess Sinai. And so again, they'll come and tell you the law was not amended for us to rectify some of these things, but they submitted their proposals late again and outside the election operations plan that they had said they would do. Now, printing of ballot papers, a specific question was asked of them. This company that you have procured, rightfully or wrongly, is accused of having led to the postponement of an election in Nigeria. And the chairman again said, there's no problem, tunashughulikia hiyo maneno. On the 8th, we have the largest postponement of elections in the history of Kenya. The elections postponed on 8th August was the largest number of postponements in the history of Kenya. So what should we do? Kenyans who run into problems and who find complicated issues they don't know what to do with, I always want to say, do something. Can somebody do something? Somebody should do something. That is what we say. But this honorable court has the power to do something. And it has power to do something even in the face of an imperial commissioner, chairman of the commission, who quite casually says, Mutadu, do something. You have power under Article 140, and again, in my view, I think the question was asked here about the utility of Section 80, subsection 4 of the Elections Act. Now, I think given the time limitations that this court has to do a recount and a retally properly, that section is one that is not very helpful or useful. The requirement of the Constitution under Article 140, sub-Article 3, is for a nullification of an election that is found not to have been in compliance with the Constitution. That is number one. Number two, I think the judges asked of us, what is to happen if we are to then find that this chair violated the Constitution or committed crimes? Again, that is a question that has risen here before. I think in 2017, we have an Election Offences Act. We have Article 251, which make provision for what is to happen to errant and imperial officers, public officers, such as the one whose case is before the court today. And so I think it would be premature to start anticipating what were to happen, because I think our Constitution has sufficient, and I think we must trust it. We must trust our Constitution and the mechanisms it has created under Article 140 and other articles for what is to happen in that eventuality. Madam Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, I want to thank you for the privilege of your attention. And unless there are any questions left for me, I will donate my 1 minute back to the court. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 15 minutes given to the fourth petitioner, Khalifa.
My Lady Chief Justice and the court, may I plead with the court once again that what we are listening to is not a reply. It is a rehash of the case afresh, and it is leaving us in a very vulnerable position because new issues are being raised, and we have had or may not have, unless you assure us, my lady, that we will have an opportunity to reply.
I think we have already cautioned counsel to reply on points of law, and you can see all of us are busy. We know what are points of law in our reply, and we know what to ignore.
Madam Chief Justice, only 2 seconds. You said that earlier. We all thought we had. Despite that, Mr. Mashari has taken 30 minutes to argue factual issues, going to affidavits, nothing on a point of law that he responded to. In my submission, therefore, the court will be perfectly entitled to disregard every word he uttered.
Yes, we know how to separate the chaff from the wheat, from the submissions. Yes.
My lady, before I start my submission so that my time doesn't run, I find myself in the position, I'm Willis Otieno for the fourth petitioner, in the unfortunate position that I'm one of the most mistreated petitioners in these proceedings by the first and second respondents. They served me late, as I indicated already during the pre-conference, and we lost the opportunity to respond. And this court did indicate that when we'll be doing our response, we can comment on some of those issues. We never filed a rejoinder to them because we were the ones who were served late outside the timelines provided by the court. So, but I don't intend to go deep into facts, but I may make one sentence references just to meet what had been allowed before, if that is in order. Number one, my lords and my ladies, we must assert that the KPMG report, the only expert report that has been done on the biometric voter register, that evidence has not been challenged by any other expert evidence. And that evidence which we annexed and referred to, we can now safely conclude that the 481,711 deduplicates that are in that report, 481,711 is admitted. The second point that I wish to respond relates to the question my learned senior Professor Gidu Muigai said, that if these elections were badly conducted, not in accordance with the law, what about the other 5-tier elections where we have governors and senators? One answer, jurisdiction. Every court will have its day. Every court will consider the facts of those cases. The third point that I wish to respond to relates to what was asked of when the regulations that gave the chairman the power to be a returning officer were passed. They were law at the time he acted. Simple answer. Maina Kiai case had already answered that question of what the law was. Maina Kiai case had interpreted Article 138(3)(c) of the Constitution. That was the law. And any regulation being made to circumvent that law by itself is unconstitutional. As I said, Helef was a petitioner in Maina Kiai case. Helef came to court. Helef has come back to court to enjoy the fruits of his litigation in Maina Kiai case. And I was his proud lawyer in that particular case as well. My lords and my ladies, reference was made that the IEBC saw the ballot boxes for the first time that necessitated the postponement of the elections on the 8th of August. My lords and my ladies, Lycos never disappoints. You've just been told how Lycos, wherever they printed ballots, they've always ended up with postponed elections. IEBC should have exercised due diligence to make sure that even the pre-printing images are cross-checked and confirmed to be accurate. An admission that I submit is that IEBC was not diligent and it must pay that penalty. It cannot transfer the consequences of their lack of diligence on the people of Kenya through fake elections. My learned friend, Mr. Gumbo, spoke on technology, and he gave us the Kriegler report. Kriegler report did not say deploy weak and vulnerable technology. Kriegler report required you to deploy sufficient, efficient, integral technology that protects the will of the voter. Cleveland report did not make a recommendation for Jose Camargo, Diego Maradona midfielder, to sit in the middle and start distributing results, as was demonstrated today in the morning. Cleveland report is not an answer or does not excuse a technology that the KPMG audit report has found and confirmed to be vulnerable, has 14 unauthorized users called Embakasi South clerks. The fourth point I want to raise is IEBC has confirmed that we look at the portal to tally the results. It is not the public portal that is used to tally. Tallying is a function of the commission. The commissioners must perform a tally of those results. And what is the commission vis-à-vis the secretariat? I refer this court to the case of Engineer Michael Kamau versus EACC, where the court specifically said the core functions of a commission cannot be performed by the secretariat. That was the Court of Appeal decision. It's part of the bundle of documents that we've annexed. You are told, my lords and my ladies, when in relation to the question of how integral the technology was, and my learned that Justice Lenaola did ask, when you take a JPEG and it comes out as a PDF, and I tie it to the response, what Camargo was doing in the system, and my learned friend Samane said, he's a plumber. He's like a plumber maintaining the system. Let me say this. Once a plumber has fixed your bathroom, that plumber has no business being in your bathroom when you are showering. If you find him at that time, you tell him, get behind me, Satan, as was said in the book of Mark 8:33 in the Bible, when the devil entered Peter, and Jesus told him, get behind me, Satan. A plumber who is in your bathroom when you are showering after fixing your shower is no longer a plumber, is a sexual offender and should be reported.
Let's stick to the
I'm guided. Mr. Somane took you through several forms, explanations, trying to explain what is voter turnout, the Kim's kit. At the end of the day, when you leave, are you able to answer the constitutional threshold, the question, are those results, is that system of technology simple, verifiable, and accurate? Why the many explanations? Why the kizungu mingi? It should be simple, accurate, and verifiable. What we've been shown is not simple, is not accurate. This court is still left with so many questions as to the true Kim's kit logins, as to the true and exact turnout of voters as at 5 p.m. on the 9th of August. You are told that parties must have their own agents to present things here. My petitioner is not a political party. He is not a candidate, but is a voter entitled to participate in elections and to present a petition. The obligation, legally speaking, is on IEBC to provide a free, fair, and verifiable election. There is no obligation on a voter like Hele Khalifa to hire and recruit agents all over the country to watch how the elections are conducted. If you do so, then you will forever relegate the participation of the people of Kenya in a free and fair election to the ability to hire and deploy over 46,000 agents in all the polling stations to watch over their vote and the votes of others. The question was raised by Mr. Ngatia, that election officials are tired, they need to go back to work. Convenience again. I say this. Our constitutional values and provisions should not be sacrificed at the altar of convenience. If the election officials are tired and cannot do another election, please, we have more Kenyans who are willing to do this work properly. Give them that opportunity. And that ties to the point that was said, that Kenyans cannot be in elections in perpetuity. Kenyans must get it right. And I say this with due respect to this honorable court, that the Supreme Court has a higher obligation when it comes to this issue, to ensure that we get what we call regime legitimacy. In countries like DRC, once a presidential election is concluded, it goes to their Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, to get a validation, regime legitimacy. That is what HELEF is questioning here. In a fractious society, highly political like this, just remove that, highly political like this, a Supreme Court's decision gives regime legitimacy to that new regime. And when questions are raised like we've done, then the Supreme Court, and when you consider the margin by which the purported declared winner has surpassed the victory, that legitimacy should not be granted by this court at this point. I want to address a few questions that were asked by the learned judges. Number one, by Justice Ibrahim, is there a lacuna in the law if we nullify, in God's grace, these elections? And, if we indict Wafula Chebukati? The answer is very simple. Article 142 of the Constitution, the president who is in office shall continue in office until a new one is sworn in. There is no lacuna in the law. The second point, Mr. Chebukati is not immortal. He could even resign from his office. Does it mean that this country can collapse if Mr. Chebukati resigned from his office today? No. Elections will still be held. We'll still have within our governance, we have a working parliament, we have a national executive, we have a judiciary. All these questions, all these issues can be addressed within those existing parameters. And when I say the president will continue in office, of course, within a narrowed mandate, but the systems and the functions of government will continue. The lacuna will not affect the people of Kenya. The right thing is to make sure that the people's voices are actually heard in a true, transparent election. My learned Chief Justice asked the question, why it took too long, why the Commission did not announce the results from morning. To corroborate that there was actually peace at Bomas, we had a choir singing the whole night and the whole day. If there was violence as was being presented here at 3 p.m., what stopped them from announcing at night those remaining polling stations, constituencies? What stopped them from announcing those constituencies in the morning? The choir is my witness. They were singing, there was peace, and everybody saw that. The other question that was asked by learned Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, about a dysfunctional commission, I wish to say this. The dysfunctionality of the commission has always been there. But it has been brought to us by what I call a celebrated group in this constitution. In 2007, Kipkirui, an individual clerk, came out and told us what is happening at KICC is cooking. In 2017, Roslyn Akombe came out and said, what is happening at IEBC is not being done in compliance with the orders of this court. And she ran away, she fled this country. In 2022, you now have the commission itself, by a majority of its members, coming out to tell Kenyans that what is being announced are not the product of the commission. Should those commissioners be vilified? Should a commission that has made an admission of a failure of Tier 3 be vilified? I say no. That dysfunctionality should actually now prove to you that indeed the Constitution is working. On the question that I wish the court to consider, what would have happened if we didn't have this court? In 2007, we didn't have this court. And those who had been said to have lost the elections didn't want to go to court when they were asked to go to court. Because to serve a president was almost impossible. The hearing of the petition will have taken forever, even 5 years, the entire term. This court should not leave Kenyans in a way that they start questioning themselves, do we still have an avenue through which we can solve these political questions? That is a core function of this court. If the court fails to stand up to occasion, the ramifications on the people of Kenya will be dire. because people end up losing trust. So I urge you that do not err on the side of convenience, to tell the people of Kenya that when we can see some of these problems, convenience requires that Chebukati cannot conduct an election within 60 days. Let us not upset the elections. It will erode public confidence in this particular court, which will be catastrophic, as we witnessed in the year 2007. Tied to the commissioners, there are affidavits, and I believe the commissioner will talk about them. In their reply, the majority commissioners in their replying affidavits have already, we must point out, number one, that these commissioners have been in office for less than 1 year. September marks their first year in office. Within that 1 year, they've filed they've written 3 memos on the conduct of the chair unilaterally making decisions. Ultimately coming out on the 15th to tell Kenyans what they had been dealing with internally over unilateral, arbitrary, all-knowing chairman. And I say this as I conclude, my lords and my ladies. When an alligator comes out of the water and tells you that the crocodile is sick, do you doubt him? When the commissioners come out and tell you that our processes are opaque, our processes are not as per the Constitution, do you doubt them? I urge you, don't doubt them. We pray, my lords and my ladies, that you allow the petitioners prayed and grant the orders which are sought, and don't shy away if you find it necessary to indict Mr. Wafula Chebukati for the transgressions and the singular manner in which he has run the IEBC to the detriment of Kenyans. Thank you very much, my lady. I yield today 13 minutes of my time back to court. 13 seconds.
Thank you. Counsel representing the 5th petitioner, David Kariuki-Ngare. 15 minutes.
Your Ladyship, the Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, members of the court, may it please you that my name is Mamboleo. I represent the 5th petitioner in the consolidated petition. We will be making this rejoinder together with my learned friend, Mr. Murara Umoke. Your Ladyship, when we filed this petition, the response we got from the respondents was that this petition was frivolous. The other response, my ladies, my lords, was that the tallying, verification, and declaration of results at the National Tallying Center is a preserve of the chairperson of the commission. That the rest of the members of the commission have absolutely no role whatsoever. I can quote my senior colleague, Mr. Kamau Karori, as deliberately insisting that the other members of the commission, the 6, don't have a role. That in fact, the chairperson of the commission has been extremely magnanimous because at various points in this process, he's even involved them somewhat. The third response we got is that the election of the President of the Republic of Kenya is just about numbers. It is numbers, numbers, numbers. And then lastly, the respondents wanted to put this court in a dilemma, a catch-22 situation, by suggesting that should they exercise some powers under Article 140 of the Constitution and probably nullify the election, we are going to get into a situation that is uncharted constitutionally. Create fear. Your Lordships, your ladies, I want to suggest to this court, when you retire, to look at what we call the theory of false dichotomy. The theory of false dichotomy is an informal fallacy that is based on a premise that erroneously limits the options that are available. And what the respondents are telling you is that the Constitution does not provide mechanisms to deal with the situation that might arise for something that is expressly provided for under Article 140 of the Constitution. I also want to suggest to you, my ladies, my lordships, when you retire, to look at what came into the open about 3 years ago, which is called the CIA Rulebook on Disruption of Organizations. How do you disrupt organizations so that you do not have an organization working as it should? And when you have achieved that, then you come out and use the law to subvert the will of the people. On Bomas on the 15th of this month, of August 2022, it is now judicially noticed that the beaming of results stopped. It is now in public notice that commissioners of the commission, at least for them, came out and stated that they do not have anything to do with the result that was being announced. It is actually admitted that as this was happening, top in the mind of the chairperson of the commission, he knew and understood the process of tallying, verification, and results to be his own precept. He's not even refuted it. He says that is how he understood it. He said that the other commissioners had no role. So what do we want to suggest to you, your lordships, your ladships? It is a very simple thing. That the reason why Kenyans were so glued to the television sets for almost 6 days is because the election of president is the only one thing that Kenyans do as a collective every once in a while. It is so important to them that you simply cannot joke about it. The reason your lordships and every Kenyan was glued to media stations for the 6 days is because you wanted to know what happened to your vote. So Article 138(3)(c), as read together with Article 38 of the Constitution, is, in my view, an expression of the greatest protection or the greatest gift that this Constitution has given to the benefit that is promised in Article 1 of the Constitution, that the people are sovereign. But if somehow you manage to capture the sovereignty of the people and set it aside by some scheme or something, then we are in a problem. And without taking too much time, because I associate myself with the submissions made by my learned senior counsels here, the important thing that we want to suggest to you, your lordships, your ladships, is that when you retire, could you kindly borrow something that I know you already know, that Article 138(3)(c) of the Constitution is the ultimate protection that Kenyans have been given with respect to the presidential vote in a presidential election. And if you do so, then I'm sure you will come to the conclusion that Article 138(3)(c) is a peremptory norm of the Constitution. It is a jus cogens norm of the Constitution from which no person is allowed to derogate. Not the IEBC, not the chairman, not the President of the Republic of Kenya, and by no means, not even the Supreme Court of the Republic of Kenya. That this court must enforce the fact that this is the highest Grundnorm with respect to the protection of Article 38 and by extension, the sovereignty of the people of Kenya. I will yield my remaining minutes to my colleague, Murara Moke. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam CJ and Honorable Justice of the Supreme Court. It's a great opportunity to appear before you once again this year. In quick rejoinder to some of the issues that were raised by the respondents, I'd like to urge the Supreme Court, when you retire, to make your determination to consider the historical context under which we operate, under which you make your decisions.
the historical context is very simple, that in the last 30 years, you cannot identify a lot of instances of free and fair elections, except in the year 2002. And that one is there in history, that this is the only election that we've ever had in 2002 when there were no contestations between the winning and the losing side. But any other election outside of that, we've always had complaints coming out of those elections. And I wish to take this opportunity to urge you to use this opportunity to bring to an end what is becoming now a perennial problem to our nation, where we cannot talk about a free and fair election. It is very simple. When you look at this particular election, it's very surprising that anyone can tell you that there was no problem, unless they live in the Republic of Utopia. Anybody, even the children, our children, can tell you that there was a problem because they would see that the results were not coming out. We were waiting for the outcome for a long time. And in the end, whatever was announced left many questions. And this brings me to the test that should apply when you make your determination. The proper test to apply is the constitutional test when you seek to determine this petition. If you find any form of constitutional infraction, then you must nullify this election. There have been multiple infractions, very serious. And the question that must linger in the minds of the judges is whether you can trust the outcome of an election that is conducted by what I could simply call the Tower of Babel, because the IEBC, when you have two factions of an independent commission, that is something so serious. It should concern not just the judges. I was happy when I heard Madam CJ, you said that you are very concerned by that. And I pray that you continue being concerned by that as you retire to make your determination, and that all of us in this country be concerned by that. That we had a commission that has two factions, that is run by what has been described as an executive chairmanship. I was very shocked. I could not believe what I was hearing today. And this was being said by counsel, instructed by that chairperson to come and tell you that he is an executive chairman. You should not accept that kind of description. It's not provided in any way in the Constitution. You read Article 88, which establishes the IEBC. It establishes a commission, not a chairmanship. Article 249 of the Constitution, it establishes independent commissions, and it requires that these commissioners act independently, and they should not be under the direction of or authority of anyone, including the chairperson of any particular commission. The 7 commissioners, each of them independent, they are not to be held hostage, as they have been held hostage by the chairperson, who says is an executive chair, and who not only says that, but also instructs his advocates to declare him a national hero. I think that is ridiculous. In my opinion, if there is any heroics that we should be applauding, all of us, is the 4 commissioners who are courageous for their courage, that they came out and said there is a problem. Because in this country, we must learn to speak up. We must speak out when we see a problem. And on my level, as an individual, I applaud them. And I think that's what we should be applauding. We should not be praising things that are seen as unconstitutional. Very quickly, I would like to highlight other provisions of the Constitution that I think that should be looked at very keenly, and there was no compliance with that, which should lead the court to determine that there was no free and fair election. Article 10. Was it fair and transparent? We cannot say that, because if we have a result that has been tallied and verified by a few commissioners, and the majority of the commissioners are not given the opportunity, or we have some results that were not verified, then how can we say that that's a fair and transparent election? I ask you to look at Article 81, the general principles for the electoral system, which talk about a free and fair election that is run in an efficient manner, that are free from any corruption. But we've had many shocking things, that in our country, we can have foreigners, even from the failing states, taking advantage of us, our systems, our people, and our electoral system. And the court should rebuke that kind of a thing. We should not allow it to happen again. It's a shame that, indeed, this is making us a laughing stock in the world. Everyone is laughing at us, that we cannot
carry on our own processes, simple process of tallying results and declaring them, that there's always a problem. When we could see the IEBC spending more time entertaining us with their music, instead of announcing the results, it was very irritating, I must say, as a voter, when you cannot find the results from the commission, but you find music that you could play very freely on your own devices if you wanted to. Article 138.3c is very clear. It has stated that the role of verifying, tallying, verifying, and announcing the results is vested in the commission. 138.10, by referring to the chairman as the one who is declaring the results, is simply delegating that responsibility to him. And even if the chairman was not there, that function would still be carried out. If you look at the IEBC Act of 2011, Section 7A and B, it clearly provides what should happen in case there's a vacancy in the position in the office of the chairperson of the IEBC. Things will go on. Nothing will stop, as the chairman would like us to believe. Everything will be carried on, even if the chairman was not there. And should this court find it appropriate to declare that there's an element of breach of Chapter 6, the court should go ahead and make that determination, and other processes can follow. As I close my presentation, because I have 1 minute, I would also like the court to consider very carefully whether we indeed have the threshold to declare a candidate as having won this election. As we speak now, we cannot determine whether we are not sure about the total valid votes that were cast in this election. And without that, you cannot determine whether we have a 50+1 threshold. And I ask the court to look very carefully. In my opinion, we do not have that. There's a lack of clarity. Mahat's presented figures, which I would say many of them were based on presumptions and projections. And that's not what the IEBC should be doing, not giving us projections. That is for the analysts to do. Independent analysts can give us projections, but for the IEBC, they must give us specific figures. They cannot give us figures that are merely projections or made based on presumption. The figures of how many voters were astray, how many ballots were astray, should be verifiable. I urge you, my ladies, and when you sit to deliberate, let's make things right for our country.
Madam Chief Justice, kindly permit me to seek your guidance. I also appear in the same matter. There were some two specific questions that were put to me by Justice Lenaura and Lady Justice Jokindungu. I will only take 3 minutes and attempt to answer them. Madam Chief Justice, the question was put to me to try and link my arguments with the issue that we are canvassing here in respect to the number of the constituencies that must participate in a presidential election. To attempt to answer that question, Madam Chief Justice, permit me to refer the court to Article 136 of the Constitution, which provides that the president shall be elected by registered voters in a national election conducted in accordance with this Constitution and any other act. That election, the directive of how that election is to be conducted, my lady, is found under Article 138, Clause 2, which provides that if two or more candidates for presidents are nominated, an election shall be held in each and every constituency. And therefore the question is, the use of the word or deliberate use of the word constituency is deliberately used by the Constitution, and these constituencies are determinable. And if you want to determine these constituencies, you therefore go to Article 89 of the Constitution. You also further go to Section 2 of the Election Act and see what defines this particular constituency. Why is it important for us to factor this in? It's because any voting that was done outside the Republic of Kenya that is not contemplated by Article 5, which defines the territory of Kenya, then any vote that was cast is an illegal vote, is an invalid vote, and it is a vote that goes towards contaminating the election. Further, my ladies, my lords, in answering the same question, the constituency that was defined by the chairman makes us to have 291 constituencies, completely out of the realm of the Constitution. And that is the illegal infractions we are saying that the election has been infiltrated with. My ladies, my lords, when you are applying these arguments, or considering my argument, consider that you held in Raila 2 that under Section 83 of the Constitution, if any of the issue, either be it legal or factual, is proved and ascertained, then that issue can void an election. The question of the constitutionality of that one extra constituency is an issue that contaminated this election, and it's an issue that should be factored and should not be lost in the eyes of this court. Finally, allow me to sum up by saying that Thomas Paine quoted and said, "A body of men holding themselves unaccountable to nobody ought not to be trusted by anyone." If IEBC does not hold itself accountable to anyone, then who should trust them? Can we even trust the processes under which they have taken through this country? I bet not. I beg to rest. Much obliged.
Next is counsel for the sixth petitioner, Okio Mtata and others. 15 minutes.
May it please you, Madam Chief Justice, Madam Deputy Chief Justice, and members, honorable members of the Supreme Court, I wish to respond in 15 minutes, which I shall share with Mr. Okio Mtata to break down the figures to show that the threshold under sub-article 4 of 138 was not satisfied because the numbers simply don't add up. But I will make a few remarks, Your Ladyship, because there are a few questions that I needed to respond to as well. It is now clear that the ipse dixit of the petitioners on the question of compliance and non-compliance of the Constitution is now sound. And clearly Articles 81 and 86 are in question on compliance. The respondents, my lords, have put up, the second respondents have put up a self-righteous and pompous response on the question of the role of the chairman. And I want to just respond in this manner, my lords. Section 5 of the IEBC Act defines what a commission is. And a commission is defined to include the chairman of the IEBC and the members. That definition, my lords, contrary to the submissions by Mr. Karori, senior counsel, does not include and expressly excludes the staff of the commission. It cannot therefore lie in the mouth of counsel to submit that the verification and the tallying of the results of the presidential elections, insofar as Form 34As and 34Bs were concerned, was done by the staff and excluded the commission, who were confined to other duties. My lord, that was a violation and an infraction that expressly went against the requirements of Article 138, 3C. Secondly, my lords, the submissions by learned friend, senior counsel, Professor Gīthurano, on the executive status of the chairman of the IEBC, I think should be taken with a pinch of salt, because Article 249(1) of the Constitution does not contemplate an imperial chairman who is all-fearing, with fear, favor, fervor, and fiat. That is not the chairman that we have. The chairman of the IEBC, appointed under Article 250 sub-article 4 of the Constitution, must be that chairman who is a first amongst equals, just like the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a primus inter pares who must work with his colleagues to guide the affairs of the Commission. I urge the Court, therefore, to decline an invitation by Professor Githu that the chairman of the IEBC is in a special position, different from the 4 commissioners who are crying aloud to be heard by this court. And my lords, this petition number 5, as consolidated, therefore tilts on the violation of Article 138(3)(c). It tilts on that violation. And that violation alone, my lord, therefore invites this court to look at or to turn to Articles 23 of the Constitution on your role as a court to interpret the Constitution in a manner that goes beyond just protecting human rights, my lords, but to look at what would guide your interpretation, the holistic approach, the purposive approach, and let me borrow my learned friend's approach, the Antonin Scalia's approach, the late judge of the U.S. Supreme Court, the textual and the contextual approach. And if you apply those approaches, my lord, then you will find that the chairman of the IEBC, in failing to properly construe his role under 138(3)(c) and 138(4), violated the Constitution, and an unconstitutional process therefore emerged that cannot put into place, my lord, a process that violates Article 3(2). My lords, there is an invitation to you to invalidate the entire process. And that is why in answering in answering the Supreme Court judge's question that was directed at me on remedies, I wish to state that, and this is because this court also has a purpose under Section 3 of the Supreme Court Act. And given that you're an election court under 84, in an ideal situation where you are construing Section 83 of the Elections Act, which must be interpreted disjunctively, because if there's an unconstitutional act, then the election cannot stand. If quantitatively, as we shall demonstrate, there is non-compliance, again, you'll have to invalidate the election. But my lord, in an ideal situation where you'd have been called upon to apply Article 232 on public service and Article 201 on public finance, you would have ordered a recount and then secured a winner. But this would only have been possible if there were no unconstitutional infractions that undermine the process and therefore make it unconstitutional. Because this is no longer about tallying and verification. It is about the bigger process of the involvement of commissioners and a split commission. And the only remedy available, my lords, Justice Ouko, the Chief Justice and member of the court, is a nullification. This is no longer the baby of Raila Amolo Odinga V. This is no longer the baby of William Samoei Ruto, Dr. the First Respondent. This is the baby of Wanjiku. It is the baby of Kenyans. Return this baby to Kenyans to determine to whom they shall hand over the baby after 60 days. I pray that you nullify the election. And I will cede my time now to Mr. Senator of Busia County, Okia Omtata, the perennial litigant. Thank you.
Distinguished honorable members of this court, I'll begin my submissions by requesting that my PowerPoint presentation be played.
Just to respond on points of law.
My lady, there was a question that was posed by Justice Ouko.
Yes.
To which Mr. Mohammed answered.
Okay.
And I would like to make a clarification on that. On the points of law, I think Professor has covered.
Okay. So you're only answering the question by the court?
Yes, my lady.
Could the time be stopped, please, so that... Yes, we are going to interrogate the figures that were used here to attempt to mislead this court. I'll begin by asking the officer to play the slide number 6. That slide that contains results, when I looked at it, and my other co-petitioners, we found that the maths did not add up. And that for us was a smoking gun, because figures don't lie. So, and I would also ask the court to realize that the comments we made about that particular result have not been challenged. That when you add the totals for the individual parties, you don't get the total ascribed. But the total ascribed is available in the workings and the affidavits of the members of the commission, which means we are dealing with fiction. I would request that you go to slide number 5. And the Honorable Judge asked, how are these things transmitting? So when you look at the fact that at 17 hours, we had 21,481,652 voters or returns which had been made, and we factor into when we try to calculate the average number per voting station, we are told we are given 46,299 polling stations. If you divide 22,120,458 by 46,299, you arrive at an average figure of 478, which is not very far from when you take 65% of 700, which is the maximum number you can have in a polling station, you end up with 455. So when you now come and using the 478, which is the average we have had, and divide 21,481,652, you get 44,962. From paragraph 29 of Mr. Chebukati's replying affidavit, the figure he gives is that 45,994 kits reported. Now, from this, you already see that if the kits were 46,299 and 45,994 had reported, you are only left with 305 kits. These are kits which had connected, so the question of saying that these kits were looking for connection is not there. These kits were connected and they discharged their mandate. And you have been told here that there were some kits in Eldoret who are pinging the same, we are sending results from Eldoret, I don't know, from wherever, one kit being used. So at that time, you get that the 305 kits, which may not have had network, if you multiply that figure by the maximum number of votes available, you will find that the 700, if you multiply that, you'll get a figure of about 213,500 votes. That's the maximum that could be transmitted, not 2 million votes. And also, if you went by my working of 1,337 kits, then the maximum amount you could get is 638,806. So the KIMS kits that transmitted are not these ones that reported at that time. But the data, the fact that they held so much data was mined. So somebody could transmit remotely, mining the data that was already reported in these polling stations. And that's how the fraud happens. For the workings on slide number 2, where you can clearly see that if we use the 21,481,652 as the baseline and the 12,065,803 as the baseline, you find these workings coming out, and you can see that 1.6 million votes are being submitted between 17 hours and 2045, and on and on. But most important, even if we were to buy the idea that they were connecting, you have got 508,647 ballots on page 3, slide 3, which transmitted after a period of 3 hours and 45 minutes. So those particular transmissions of 508,647 are a figure that's very curious, because if you deduct the tally for Elders from this figure, you hit almost the exact figure that Mr. Willis, Land Council Willis, has presented to this court, coming from the KPMG audit, that there was that number of voters, there was a number of ghost voters equivalent to that one. When we go to the other thing that supports our position, there was a question of what was the denominator used for voter turnout. I will invite you to look at at the petition at page 41. There's a letter, a press statement signed by Mr. Chebukati, saying that he used the National Voter Register to calculate, and if I may just read it quickly to the court. So page 41 is handwritten 41. It says, paragraph 2, at around 4 p.m., 12,069,803 registered voters out of 12,065,803 voters out of 22,120,458 had cast their vote. This equates to 56.17% of voter turnout.
How much do you need? Because we have the slide. Could we give you 2 minutes to finish?
Here that you will refer to the slides. So, when I look at that, you'll find that there's no basis for claiming that the figure that claiming that the Kim's kits were used as the denominator. It's not possible, and it's not there. Also, I would like this court to take note of how the percentages are being played with. That's slide number 10. You will find that whereas the chairman is reported 12,065,803 people voted, who voted represented 56.17 of the total registered voters of 22 that. At paragraph 26 of the replying affidavit, Mr. Sunkuli, using the same number of voters, 12,065,803, but as reported by the chairman, but again as a different number as a denominator, he arrives at the same percentage. So there you can see how they can play with numbers by changing the denominators and arriving at magical figures. So my members of the Honorable Court, my prayer is that my submissions are that these figures are cooked, they were worked backwards to achieve a certain figure, but fortunately, on the Form 34C, the smoking gun is seen. And since figures don't lie, and if the math doesn't add up, then this court should quash the results. We were told about military precision. Military precision is the ability to shoot a bullet with a bullet. That's how a missile downs another missile. That is not what we are saying here. There's no military precision in these figures.
the last petitioner, seventh petitioner, Julia Nyoka-Bichege, and others.
May it please you, Melody, Madam CJ, and other members of the court, to go straight to the issue. I've had a lot of Shakespeare and other learned fellas. I went to public schools. I may not be able to remember anything about Shakespeare. But, Madam CJ, besides a Greek philosopher known as Plotinus and Adam Smith, my favorite philosopher is called Karl Marx. And one of the most famous quotes that he made is this, that history repeats itself, first as tragedy, second as farce. Now, I go to my issue. Yesterday, Madam CJ, when I was listening to my learned colleague, Mr. George Oraro, Senior Counsel, I could not fail seeing the echoes of 2007 in what is happening today. Madam CJ, in 2007, the secretary to the commission, just like this year, was at the heart of what happened. The secretary was called Suleiman Chege. The secretary today is called Hussein Marjani. Same problem of numbers. The Kenya law reports would bear, and Mr. Isa Mansour is also here, that I represented Samuel Kivuitu and others when they were removed from office. Now, it turns out that, and listening to my learned colleagues, that just like in 2007, the person who knew why the results are like that was Suleiman Chege. Listening to the presentation yesterday, it also appears that the only person who really can tell us about these numbers is Hussein Marjani. Second similarity is that both Raila Odinga and William Ruto were at the heart of what happened in the year 2007. But that is not the more important point. The more important point is the differences. The differences were these. In 2007, and under the constitution that was existing that time, the election was announced on the 30th of December 2007. And the president sworn on that day assumed office. But the difference this year is this. After 15th courtesy of the new constitutions, on the 15th of August when the declaration was made, the person designated as the winner by Chebukati became president-elect. That's an important distinction. The second most important distinction is this, that the former constitution of Kenya did not have an equivalent of 138 of the constitution. There is that distinction today, which is what I was calling stage 3 of a presidential election. It was never there. The next issue was that in 2007, the presidential elections were held by the High Court under its original jurisdiction and special jurisdictions of elections. This one comes to the Supreme Court, and the basis upon which that is done is on the basis of Article 140 of the Constitution. There is no sitting president who will be appearing before you. There is only a president-elect. Now, my first petitioner, Julia Chege, asked me, because there was a subjective question that was posed in her view by Judge Smoky Nwanjala, that how come there was no protestations by these people when they were being given domestic chores? According to Julia Chege, who had to resign from her university job as a lecturer, there is something that needs to be understood, that for 99% of the human population, you want to follow the natural order of things. You don't disturb things. You let them things as they are. So that to Julia Chege, it is important that the court must understand that from your point of view, a lot of you, and she knows that history, have had a previous opportunity to stand up for something, an opportunity to say no. Not everybody has had that opportunity. And therefore, the 4 commissioners for ultimately, on the 15th, having the courage to have something to stand for. They are heroines and heroes of this country. We come now talking about heroes to what my professor of criminal law and procedure, Dr. Gedhu Muigai, said. Dr. Muigai, looking straight to the face of this court, said 2 things. A, the problems in our elections is not IEBC, but the candidates. History does not support that conclusion. Second thing he said, B, Wafula Chebukati is a national hero. I don't have to say anything on that. Now, Madam CJ, there is the issue of the word independent, or in the designation of IEBC. The word independent, it is further elaborated by under Section 26 of the IEBC Act. It says IEBC is independent, but shall be subject to public participation and to engage stakeholders in the discharge of its mandate. Madam CJ and members of this court, I flatter myself quite often that I have a reasonable understanding of Kenya's electoral laws. However, Madam CJ, listening to my learned colleagues yesterday, I had a lot of reasons to doubt whether that is true, if what they said is actually the true representation of the law. And in several senses, under Article 81, the election should be simple, accountable, accurate. But until yesterday, my understanding was this, that reference to the Commission and Article 81, 86, 88, and 138 of the Constitution triggers the image of Chebukati and 6 others. I've never imagined Marjani and other returning officers when we talk about the Commission. B, based on sections 10 and 11 of the IEBC Act, my understanding has always been that the Secretary of IEBC is the chief executive, the head of the secretariat, the main employee of the commissioners, who appoints him. But now it appears to be that for purposes of a presidential election, and we heard it from his lawyers, he's actually the main man. Was this what the Constitution wanted it to be? Welcome to the Republic of Kusadikika. I must agree with my learned colleague, Mr. Mudhomi Kidiankolu, that it would appear that since we did our elections, we became some kind of a terrestrial Kusadikika, and several questions arise. When, why, and how? When did this happen? It first happened just before midnight or 9th of August, when we retired to bed. One figure we ought to have had was not known. How many of us voted? That is the when. How did it happen? It happened because on the 8th of August 2022, Wafula Chebukati published that Gazette notice that I talked about. On the face of it, makes the chairman a dictator. No, that is not the issue. If you read it as an instruction manual, it was to give the job to Hussein Marjani. That is what happened. Why did it happen? It happened, and we explained in our affidavits, paragraphs 42 to 45, and what they say that effectively, on the 15th of August, when these elections were declared, from 7:30 to 6 p.m. on that day, the Commission, as the Commission, had lost effective control under Article 138 of the Constitution. I come because I'm trying to rush myself to the petition, number 7. This petition, Madam CJ, is actually a numbers petition. I didn't want to make a lot of fuss that I would have needed more time, but in case my mouth does not go fast enough, I urge you that you give me a little leeway to conclude what I need to say. The issue is this, Madam CJ. When you pose the question that you posed, how do you have evidence 700,000 people did not vote? You triggered some kind of public participation on my phone. I had many calls. Kipe, why did you just say it's 700? It's about 3 million. But of course I had to tell them, no, we just said 700 because we had some kind of evidence. So it's a big issue, Madam CJ, that you triggered a public participation. So many people don't vote on account of non-enforcement of Regulation 90 by IEBC. Now, for whatever the value is this. I can demonstrate very shortly, and we've done that in our petition and in our, in our affidavit, that when you have a petition based on non-compliance, how do you prove it? We have an affidavit of Julia Chege that basically has not been controverted. She says where she was voting. She was voting as an MP she was contesting the office of Kangema. And she said how she interacted with election officials. There were no affidavits sworn by the commissions to say those interactions she talked about were not true. But more importantly is this. When you say Regulation 90 says you are going to publish notices on how election officials and security officers are going to vote, IEBC needed to do a very simple thing. Namely, what did you publish to implement it? If you didn't publish anything to implement it, you are responsible for non-compliance. How do you treat non-compliance? You tell the Supreme Court. We could not be able to have non-compliance for reason A, B, C, D. Then the Supreme Court may decide to excuse you or not. But in the absence of that, non-compliance has been proven. What is the effect of this non-compliance? We have stated in our further affidavit, it's a numbers thing. If 700,000 people did not vote and you adjust it whichever way you want, you will still have a figure of 300,000. So that the long and short of it, my ladies and my lords, is this. Unless you excuse IEBC, and they did not ask you to excuse them, then you must find that the numbers in petition number 7 could have altered if those people had voted the results of the general election. And therefore, it is not permissible for anybody to be able to say, oh, it's a numbers thing. Petitioners brought no number. We brought numbers, and there was no response. We come to the issues of the issues of the procedure under Article 138. Under Article 138, that's one of the best done judgments that I've read. I've read it many times. It was written by, at least Judge Jouko was there writing it. Catherine Mantoinoti was there. He was my people master. One of the best written judgments. I've read it many times. But yesterday, it somehow appeared I don't understand these things. So I read one more time yesterday night. And I thought, I think I understand what it says. So it was violated in 3 major ways, my lady. Number one is this, issues of the voter turnout. The issues of the voter turnout until yesterday, I thought is usually settled before the elections through the gazettement of a voters register. For these elections, it was done on the 21st of June 2022 through Gazette number 7290. But listening to my learned colleague, Mr. Somane, it would appear that fairly educated people like James Orengo, Firoz Noroji, Paul Mwangi can actually write petitions, and they were told in open court they did not understand what is all this about Article 190. And I also shuddered that if they didn't understand, probably I also did not. The second failure is this. In short, I'm saying the register cannot be mysterious. If the register is mysterious, the election is not simple, does not meet the requirement of Articles 81 and 86. Number two, the stoppage of the public display. I didn't hear a straight answer to that. Now that there was no straight answer to the issues of the failure of results and the 27 were not read, that goes straight to the root of the procedure under 138. If that was not done, my lords, there is no way in which you can be able to say the election was valid. For a simple reason, which is this. That when can I have 2 minutes? 2 minutes. Yes, I can do it in 2 minutes. For the simple reason that we were dealing with under Article, for the conclusion, the whole point about Article 138 is that the procedure must be concluded. If it is disrupted, you have to hold that Article 138 was violated. The next issue is this, the third one. We talked about the issue of effective control. If you are convinced by what you have heard, and we have gone through this in the last 2-3 days, that IEBC lost effective control from 7:30 on the 15th to 6 p.m. when the results were read, there can be no basis for this court to say anyone was validly elected as president of Kenya. My learned colleague, Mr. Fred Ngatia, whom I respect a lot, said that William Ruto won these elections fair and square. That expression, fair and square, to my mind, comes from, as I understood, the famous judgment where Judge Madan was in the Githunguri case, where the basic point was this, that certain issues may happen that may make even a person who, on the face of it, could have been liable for criminal offenses not to be properly tried. And therefore they said it makes any convictions to be bad in law. You do not have a fair and square deal. Under Article 138, Raila Odinga, the other surrogate petitioners, they need a fair and square deal that their votes were not enough. Finally, my lady, the Chief Justice, Article 138 must not die in your hands. We are most obliged.
I think that brings us to the end of. Yes, that brings us to the end of rejoinders. We are looking at Senior Counsel, Mr. Mwite, but we know very well your clients were respondents. It was only for the under-representation that we allowed them to come just after the petitioners. They do not have a right of rejoinder.
Chief Justice, I am acutely aware of the time constraints within which this Honourable Court must adjudicate on this petition. And may I say that this Honourable Court is entitled, suo motu, to decide that the 14 days specified in Article 140 mean 14 working days. Yes, to exclude Saturday, Sunday, and public holidays. You can do that, suo motu. I am pleading, Chief Justice, I'm pleading on behalf of the 4 commissioners. I plead
They have had very, very little time in this court. I plead.
Well, that is why I was looking at you with the questioning eye, because there were some questions also which were asked, and they need to be responded to.
Yes, those are the ones. I'm just pleading.
Yes.
Allow my colleague Mansu Issa some 8 minutes, and Dr. Arroa some 3 minutes, and yours truly some 2 minutes only.
That is 15 minutes.
Because
to answer those questions.
Because, Chief Justice,
yes,
those questions directed at those 4 commissioners are very important. And
Thank
when
you.
others were answering questions, a lot of maligning, a lot of... Please give them that opportunity to have their case stated. They are the majority in that commission.
Thank you, Senior Counsel. I
thank
think we've heard your plea because we asked questions. So we'll give them 15 minutes to answer, not now. We want to take a break. And immediately we finish, there was an issue raised by Senior Counsel Gatia responding to some 2 Forms 34, and you asked for 5 minutes. And then we will give the parties 15 minutes, not all the parties, the ones who are connected with the discovery and the scrutiny, 15 minutes in the afternoon to respond to the report.
I request, Madam Chief Justice, may I request 5 minutes for the Commission, because we are the custodians of the form, the legitimate forms.
Yes.
And my learned friend, Mr. Orengo, needs his lunch now. He's heckling.
Okay, we'll give you 5 minutes, and the court will arise.
What we are about to.